So a few months ago, I released a video tutorial on how to build a real estate-based website using WordPress, Elementor Pro, and advanced custom fields, alongside some additional plugins. Well, a lot of questions were raised on there, and how do you take this to the next level? So things like, how do you upload your own listings? How do you manage those listings? How do you create more complex filters and searches? And a whole range of other questions. Well, instead of going through and answering every single one by one, I'm going to create another video tutorial for you today that's going to take you through and answer a lot of those questions, and also go through a lot more techniques to take it to the next level again. Now, even though this is based upon a real estate website, you could use this on a multitude of different topics. However, this is not a beginner's tutorial. So if you're not accustomed to using Elementor Pro, the theme builder, advanced custom fields, custom post types, and all those kinds of things, I've already created a range of tutorials to get you up to speed on how to do those. That'll get you then ready to jump in and create more complex websites like covered in today's video tutorial. Now, if you want to check those out, there's a list in the description below so you can follow those and get yourself up to speed. With that being said, let's hop over into the dashboard of WordPress and start taking a look at some of the tools we're going to be using to create this real estate-based website. So, we've jumped over to the dashboard now of WordPress, and we're going to take a look at the plugins that we need to get this real estate website realized. Now, a lot of these plugins are commercial plugins, as in you have to pay for them. But the one thing I've found is that they're a great combination of tools that work flawlessly together. This is something that's worth its weight in gold. Now, could you find free or cheaper alternatives to some of the tools we've used, if not all of the tools we've used? Well, you probably can. However, would they all work so well together? This is something you'd have to test out yourself. Like I say, I know this combination works well, so we're going to stick with this, and all the applicable links are in the description below. So if you want to grab any of these or find out more, you can do that just by following those links. Now, first of all, we've got admin columns. This is the free version, and we're going to use this just to make our dashboard just a little bit more user-friendly. Next up, we've got Advanced Custom Fields Pro. Now, you can do a lot with the free version. However, the Pro version gives you extra tools, things like repeater regions, galleries, and so on. Next up, we've got Anywhere Elementor Pro. Now, this plugin allows us to do a lot of things when we're working with Elementor that go above and beyond what you can do with Elementor Pro. Now, I'm not going to go over what these do. We're going to take a look at them as we go through the process of using those different tools, and we'll see exactly how to use them then. Custom Post Type UI and Classic Editor, both free, both very useful. We need Custom Post Type UI to create the custom post types for our properties and also for our agents, the people that are going to be selling the properties. We've then got LE Custom Skin, which is the free version because this allows us to create custom loops for our layout. Elementor, the free version, and Elementor Pro, the Pro version, because obviously we need to tap into the ability to create our own theme files. We've then got Facet WP and some of the extra things we want to use to that, such as the Elementor plugin and the hierarchy select option. We've got Search WP, which is a great way of working through and creating a search function that'll search your entire site and also applying what weight you want to the various different aspects or the various different pieces of information that you have as each individual post and post type. Now, you could, if you wanted to, we've got Facet WP and Search WP, you could take a look at Search and Filter Pro, which is another WordPress plugin that does a very similar type of thing. However, I don't think that it has all of the same functionality that we have, things like the Elementor integration and the hierarchy select. However, I could be wrong. I haven't tested this out. Now, if you'd like me to take a look at Search and Filter Pro, let me know in the comment section below. I'll grab myself a copy and we'll take you for a spin and see how it actually stacks up against this combination. And the final thing we have is WP User Frontend and User Frontend Pro. Now, this allows us to create a user section if we want to. I'm not going to cover that in this particular video, but what this allows you to do is create that should you want to. But what we are going to cover is the ability to add in new listings into the database. So this is a nice way of letting someone on the front end add in a new property, and then you as the admin can confirm or delete that entry, and then it'll either show up on the site or be deleted from your database. So these are the tools we're going to use. When it comes to the theme, we're going to take a look. What we're going to do is we're going to use the Hello theme, which is the completely free and basically blank theme as part of Elementor. And if we jump over to our site, you can see this is what we're currently working with. I've created the header, I've created the footer, and we're using the default, basically blank template for the loop. In other words, whatever posts we currently have on here. Now, before we go any further in this video tutorial, we've covered what we're going to use, but we also need to cover what you need to know. Now, this is not a beginner's tutorial by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to be assuming a lot of prior knowledge and understanding when it comes to working with advanced custom fields, creating custom post types, using Elementor Pro, creating theme files, and all those kinds of things. I'm not going to cover those. We're going to fly over those various different aspects when we're using them. However, if you want to find out how to use any of those core skills, I've got videos that'll take you through every single step on how to use the theme builder with Elementor Pro, and also how to get right from the beginning with advanced custom fields and custom post type UI. There are links in the description below to those videos so you can find out exactly how to get yourself started, and then come back to this video and start following along with all the more detailed content inside this tutorial. Now, speaking of the description below, we'll have timestamps inside there for each of the core sections inside this tutorial. So if you want to jump around, if you need to go back to anything to go over it again, you can do that very easily from there. So now that we've gone ahead and set all the plugins up and got everything ready, we're now ready to start working with the custom post types. So the first thing we're going to do is go through and set those up, ready to move on and start working with advanced custom fields and tie in all the meta fields into those custom post types. So let's do that right now. Now, for this website, we're going to have two different custom post types. We're going to have a custom post type for properties, and we're going to have one for agents or agencies. This is going to allow us to link those two things together and do some really creative things. Now, I'm not going to cover that in this initial step, but you'll see as we go through and start working with creating the properties and then linking them through to the agents, you can see how useful and how powerful these tools and this particular technique is going to be for you. And hopefully what you'll see is you can use this in future projects in a million different ways. Okay, so let's start off by creating a first custom post type. So we're going to come over to the custom post type UI from our dashboard, and from there we're going to come down to add edit post types. Going to click. Once we've done that, this will take us into the add edit post type section. From here, we're just going to put in the basic details. So the slug is going to be property. Then we're going to come down to our plural label, which is going to be properties. And finally, we've got the single, which is going to be property. So once we've done that, we could add the post type if we wanted to. However, we're going to come down and we're going to take a look at some extra options that are going to allow us to kind of configure the various different aspects of this custom post type. Now, you can, if you want to, like I've covered in the basics videos, you can put in additional labels. However, for this example, I'm going to leave all of those blank. So we're going to scroll down until we get to the settings section. In here, we're going to set up some basic settings that we need to make sure it operates in the way that we want. So we're going to leave most of these things as they are. However, we say we're going to come down until we find has archive. We're going to set that to be true. If that's set to false, you're going to find that when you try to create the custom archive as part of Elementor Pro for your website, and then you try to assign it to this particular custom post type, the option won't be available. That's because by default, CPT UI says there's no archive. Okay, so we want to make sure that it's not excluded from search. I'm going to scroll down and you see we've got hierarchical. Again, is set to false. We want to change that to be true because we want to create a hierarchy of information. And then we've got some other things we can do, which is more cosmetic and features inside the actual dashboard and allow you to sort of get a bit more creative with various different aspects. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down and you can see, first of all, we've got menu position. So we're going to set that to be position 2. And that just says where it's going to be displayed in this left-hand section in your dashboard. Then you can see it says show in menu. Again, we're going to leave that set to true. We can put in a menu icon if we want to, and I've already gone ahead and created a link through to the actual icon I want to work with, and these are just the dash icons. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to the menu icon, drop that inside there. You could, if you wanted to, just say choose an icon yourself from your own uploads and do what you want from there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to say supports. You can see it says title, editor, and featured image. That's perfectly fine. We're going to leave those. However, if you wanted to do extra things like excerpts, custom fields, comments, revisions, and so on, you could enable or disable anything you wanted from there. So now all we need to do is say add post type. Once we've done that, you can see we now have the new section in the left-hand side called properties, and we can come in and we can say all properties or add new. So there's the first custom post type. We're going to come back in again and we say add edit post type, and this time we're going to create the link through to our agency or agent custom post type. So again, we're going to drop in the post slug. So we're going to just say agent, plural is going to be agents, and the singular is agent. So let's scroll down again down to our settings and just make sure we've got everything set up as we wanted here. So we say we want to just come through and say we want has archive is true, and we also want to make sure that hierarchical is set to true. So that's basically all we need to do, but obviously if you want to make changes or you need to add anything, you can simply come back at any point, come out to the Edit Post Type tab, choose the option that you want, and then you can make any changes you want to any of the details there. So if you miss anything out, or you just make a mistake or want to change things, you can just come in and do that. So there's the basics now. We've created our custom post types. The next thing we need to do now is create the taxonomies that are associated with these custom post types. Now to do that is also very similar to what we've just done. We come over this time to add edit taxonomies, click on there, taxonomy slug, we're going to call that property type, plural label, property types, and finally the singular label, property type. So this is just going to be how we kind of group these different properties together, and you can create multiple different taxonomies if you want to sort of group things in any kind of logical fashion you want. I'm just going to show you some simple ways of doing things, but you can, and I would recommend you expand upon this to get exactly what you need to create a very simple, structured way of creating content. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is specify what these taxonomies or what this specific taxonomy is linked through to. So you can see underneath it says attached to post type. We can see we've got some of the basic core functions that we have as part of WordPress. We've also got some things inside here so they're specific to some of the plugins we've got. For example, AE Global Templates is Anywhere Elementor, and My Templates is to do with Elementor Pro. What we want though is the properties section. So we're going to say properties, and we've now associated the property type with the properties custom post type. Again, we've got the additional labels should we want to use those. We're going to come down to the settings section, and we're going to just set a few things up inside here to make sure it operates the way we want. Again, we're going to set hierarchical to true. You can see then we've got a lot of other options we can also configure. We want to specify show in admin column is going to be useful. So we're going to say true. It just means that in the admin column, when we take a look at all our properties, it will list the property type inside there. If we scroll through, you can see we've got a lot of different things like show in quick bulk edit panel. So we're going to say we want that as well. And that simply means that when we're editing or quick editing anything inside our custom post type, we can go in and we can specify and change any of these taxonomy details specific to that particular post. It's just a quick way of editing. So we're going to say we want that, and we say add taxonomy. Now if we come over to the property section again, you'll see we have property types has been added in there. However, if we come at the agent section, you'll see property types not listed there because obviously we didn't associate it with that custom post type. So with our custom post types already configured and set up ready for both our properties and for our resellers or our agents, we now need to go ahead and start populating those custom post types with the advanced custom fields that are related to each one of those. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at doing that next. So from our dashboard, we're going to come down to the custom fields section, and we're going to come over to add new. And once we're inside there, we're going to go through the process now of creating our custom fields. So first thing we want to do is just give this a title. So we're going to call this property details. Before we start setting the actual fields we want, let's just set the location for where this is going to be used. So post type is equal to post. We need to change that to property. So this just means that any of the custom fields that we now create will only be available inside the properties custom post type. We can come down if we want to as well, adjust any of the settings inside there so we can fine tune and tweak the look and the layout of this. However, we're going to leave everything as it is for now. So we're now ready to move on and start creating the actual fields themselves. Now, we're going to do a couple of things inside here. We're going to create fields, but we're also going to start grouping things together as tabs. Now, this isn't something you need to do, but when you start to create more complex advanced custom fields and you use those inside your custom post types, you can get a lot of data all in one bit of a mishmash. This is just a nice visual way of changing the way things look. So the first thing we're going to do is say add a new field. From there, we're just going to say basic details. And this is just simply going to be the name that's going to be used on the tab. So field name is basic details. That doesn't really matter though, because once we change this from anything we have listed here to tab, which you can just about see right at the bottom under the layout section, you'll see that disappears anyway, because this isn't data we can pull in. This is simply a visual way of grouping things together. So once we've done that, we've basically done everything we need on there. So we're going to come down now, we're going to close this up a second, say add field. And the next field we're going to add in is now we start putting in the details for our property. So the first thing we're going to drop in is the property price. You can see it automatically pre-fills out the field name. Next up, we need to say what field type this is, and we're going to set this to be a number. Scroll down, and if we want to, we can set any of the details up. So we're going to say this is required. The prepend is basically just what we want to put in beforehand. So we're going to say we want to put in the pound sign. So drop in a pound sign there, but obviously if you're working in dollars or yen or anything else, you can drop that in there. And again, this is just a visual thing. It's not really going to do anything else other than that. We're going to set this to be 30 pixels wide, or 30% wide, I should say, just to make sure that it isn't huge on our screen. Then we're going to close that up. We're going to come and add another field in. And the next field we're going to add in is going to be the property address field. So again, we're just simply going to put in a title that will pre-fill out the field name. Change this time to text area to give us a bit more space. Again, we want this to be required. We can, if you want to, set up things like the rows. We're going to set that to be 4. We don't want this to be too big. And we're going to say, yep, everything else looks pretty good on this. We'll close that down again. And the next field we're going to put in is property features. Now, property features is a way of allowing us to select what kind of features we want to have. So these are pre-filled out. You can just select those features. So again, we'll just let that pre-fill the name out. The field type, we're going to come in and we're going to change that to be checkbox. So let's just scroll down now and let's go through and set what values we want. So choices, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can either put in just a value, or you can put a value and a label together. As you can see, there's a little example of what I'm talking about there. All we want to do though is we want to drop in just the actual choices, the name of the choice we want. Now the reason I'm doing this is because we're not assigning this to anything really important. This is just going to be output for the end user to see what we're talking about. So it's a very, very simple way of doing things. We don't need to pass data over and do anything with that data other than just output it. Allow custom, this allows us to let the end user or anyone that's actually inputting data to do with a property, they can add extra choices in. So as new choices become available, they can be added in directly inside the dashboard. So we're going to say allow custom, and we're also going to say save custom. Default value, we're going to leave that empty as is. We're going to set the layout to horizontal. And then we come down, you can see we've got the return value. Now you've got value, label, or both in an array. Now because we're only using a value, in other words, we've got air conditioning, barbecue, and so on, we can just leave that set to value if you want to, or you can actually choose label. It doesn't really matter too much, to be honest. So that's what we want to do there. So we're going to scroll back up, I'm going to just close that down. And finally, we're going to drop in the map option. So we're going to say add new, we're going to drop in map, and you can see, pre-fill out the field name, come down, we're going to just choose Google Maps from the list. So we're going to just scroll through until we find Google Map, and there we go. So we're going to leave everything else set inside there as is, but obviously if you wanted to, you could change the zoom value, the height value, and so on. Right, we're going to close that down now. So we've created our first basic details tab. We want to now create another tab. So what we're going to do is say add field. This time we're going to call this gallery. So we're going to say gallery inside there, field name, again, pre-fills it out, but doesn't matter. Choose the type, scroll that up a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And we're going to come down and we're going to choose tab. Okay, so there we go. So you can see that's done that. So the next thing we're going to do is just choose what we want to put inside there. So this is going to be our property gallery. So this is just where we're going to show more images of the actual property itself. So let's close that down, add a new field in, call this property gallery. Come down and we're going to just choose gallery as our option. And this is, like I say, this is the reason why you need to have the pro version of Advanced Custom Fields, because you don't have gallery as an option inside the free version. So once we've set that gallery option, we can now come over and set any kind of values that we want. We've got image array, image URL, or image ID. We're going to leave that as image array. The preview size is just the size it's going to display inside the dashboard, not on the front end of the website. So don't worry about that. Now, the only other option I want to draw your attention to is this library section where it says all or upload to post. Now, this is dependent upon how you want to operate within your actual website itself, within dashboard of WordPress. If you do all, it means that any images you upload as part of a custom post will be uploaded to your media library and accessible throughout the entire website. That's great if you want to make those images accessible to pages outside this specific listing. However, if you are going to end up with potentially thousands and thousands and thousands of images, it may be a better option to say upload to post. That will upload the images and only show them inside the post area itself for this specific property. Up to you how you do it, depending upon the complexity and the size of your site, storage, and a whole manner of different reasons why you may want to choose one option over the other. I'm going to leave it to all just for simplicity because I'm going to reuse the images various different times as I demo this. However, normally on a more complex site, I would choose the upload to post option. Okay, so that's the gallery. Everything is in place there. We don't need to do anything more on that. Finally, we're going to come down, we're going to choose the agent details. So we're going to close this down, add another field in, and this field is again going to be just a tab, just so we can separate things off. So we're going to do that. We're going to come down, then we're going to choose tab as the option. But this time, we're going to check the endpoint box, because this is the last tab we're going to use inside our custom post type. So with that done, we're just simply going to come in now and add in our final entry, which is going to be the property agent. And this is where you can choose a relationship status between the property and the agent. Now, this is something that may be a little complex if you've never used it before. However, once you start to get your head around what's going on, it actually is fairly simple and straightforward. However, what we're going to do is we're going to come and add our new field. We're going to drop in the name, which is property agent, but we're going to choose the field type. Let me just scroll up the page so you can see this a little better. From there, we're going to scroll down and we're going to choose the option for relationship. So doing that opens up a range of options now that are specific to these relationships. So we now need to configure things the way that we want them to work. So under the filter section, we're going to come down and I just want search. So we're going to uncheck post type, uncheck taxonomy. We're going to select featured image. Now, before we go any further, we need to say filter by post type. We need to say, well, where do we want to pull this data from? If we click on there, you can see it gives us all of the options that we currently have. What we want to do is choose the agent option, because this is where we're going to link this property to a specific agent. So if we just choose agent, once we've done that, we've now told it where we want to look for this information. So finally, we're going to come down and we're going to say, what's the return format? We're going to say post ID. We want this to use the specific ID of the custom post type. In this example, we're talking about the custom post type ID for a specific agent that will be linked to this particular property. Okay, so once we've done that, we've pretty much got everything we want inside there. So we can come back up, close this down, and let's just take a little look at what we've done. We've created 3 tabs. We've got the basic details tab, the gallery tab, and the agent details tab. Inside there, we've grouped together various different aspects of the property and also the agent. Now, again, like I say, these are probably a lot less than you'd normally have as part of a property, but they just demonstrate the different kinds of ways you can set things up. You would, in a real world scenario, have a lot more fields, but the process is going to be exactly the same for not only creating these custom post type fields, but also how you actually output those and display those when we take a look at the templating section. So with that all set up, we now just have to go through the process of publishing this, and we've created our first set of custom fields. So let's publish that. And once we've done that, let's just take a look at this inside the actual property section, and then we'll come back and we'll set things up for our agent. So come over to our properties, we're going to come into add new, and inside there you can see we can have all the normal things we'd expect to see. We've got a couple of extra fields inside here that are specific to the fact we've got things like anywhere Elementor install, we've got sort of WP user front-end forms and so on. So these are things that you're going to see that are specific to that particular set of functionality. However, if we scroll down, you can see we now have our property details section set up. We've got basic details, gallery, and if we scroll down, we've also got the agent details. Now you may notice that we've got the Google Maps set up inside the dashboard. However, we're not seeing the maps displaying correctly. And this is because we need to tell Advanced Custom Fields Pro how to use or what the API key is for our specific account inside the Google Maps API. Now this is something that is specific to you. You're going to need to set this up and get access to your own custom API. However, the process of then integrating into the Advanced Custom Fields is fairly straightforward. What we need to do is we need to come in and edit the functions PHP file. Now normally I would edit that inside the actual FTP account or via my hosting account. However, you can, if you want to, come into the theme editor under appearance in your dashboard, and from there you can say you understand the warning, come over to your themes function, and from there you can scroll right the way down to the bottom and you can simply drop in the code that I'll give you a link to in the description below, which you just need to insert your custom API key into, and then you should have access to the functions. So I'm going to drop that in there and save this and jump back out. And before I do that, the reason why I would generally recommend you don't go about doing it directly inside WordPress itself is because if you make a mistake and you corrupt your functions PHP file, then it means that you can potentially get locked out of the dashboard, and then you'd have to go in and get access to that file and edit it via either your hosting account or via FTP. Much easier to do it that way. If you make a mistake, you're already in there, and it just makes the whole process a lot simpler. Okay, so I'm going to drop in my details, and then we'll save this, and we'll take a look at the dashboard. And there we go. Just by doing that, you can see now we now have access to the Google Maps API, and we've got the map. We can go through and search, and we can do all the kinds of good things that we want inside there. So that's the property section set up, the custom fields, the custom post type, and so on. Next, we're going to go through the process of creating our agents custom fields. So again, we're going to do the same thing. Again, we're going to come back out. We're going to go into our custom field section. We're going to say add new. And from there, we're going to start creating our agent details. Now, I'm keeping this really, really simple and straightforward. We're going to come through. We're going to say the rules are going to be, again, like we did last time. We're going to set this post type is equal to agent. We're going to leave all the settings as they are. However, we're just going to add in some really basic details about the agent themselves. So we're going to say add field. We're going to add in the telephone number. We're going to set that. Text is perfectly fine, so we can leave spaces. However, you can set that to whatever you want. Required is yes. And we're going to add another field in. And this one is simply going to be the agent's email address. And we say agent email, drop that in there. We'll say we want this to be an email field. We're going to set that to be required. And other than that, we're going to leave it as is. So if we take a look, when we created the custom post type, we set that up so it would have the title, which we can use as the agent's business name. We've also then got the details, so we can put in any details we want. And finally, we've also got the featured image, which we can use then for the logo or so on, whatever you kind of want to use. Let's hit publish on there. Once we've done that, if we come over now onto our agent section and we come in to say add a new agent, you can see we've now got those extra fields for the agent telephone number and the agent's email alongside the featured image, the actual details, and the title. So you can set this up in any way that you want. You can add in any details that you want, so you can make this as comprehensive as you need to. Okay, so with that in place, we've now created the ACF section. We've linked those through to our custom post types. We're now ready to move on to the next stage. So next up, we're going to take Anywhere Elementor Pro and start building out some of the templates that we need to work with both our properties and also to do with our actual agents. Now we're going to use this because we don't have native support inside Elementor Pro for these kinds of features, so we have to use this plugin for that. So let's just jump over now into Anywhere Elementor Pro and start taking a look at how we build those template files. So what we need to do now is create a couple of agents just so we can use that data when we're actually going through and setting the templates up. So there we go. There's the data for the first person. So what we're going to do is we're just going to publish that to be our first agent, and then I'm going to quickly just go through and do exactly the same thing now for another agent. Once I've done that, we're going to crack on then and start taking a look at how we start to pull things together using Anywhere Elementor and some of their templating functions. There we go. There's our two agents all set up. So now with that in place, we need to go over to Anywhere Elementor. So we're going to come over to the entry for AE templates, and from there, we're going to come in and we're going to say add new. Once we're in the add new section, we can go through the process of creating the various different templates that we need. Now, Elementor Pro's theme builder has a lot of options available, but there are still some areas that it really just doesn't work with. One of those key areas is things like repeater and relationships and things along those lines. Now, this is why we're going to start using Anywhere Elementor Pro, because this gives us that extra functionality and fills in those gaps that we currently have. Now again, as with everything, I hope this is something that Elementor Pro will address in the near future, but until then we have to rely upon third-party tools like Anywhere Elementor Pro. So the first template we're going to create is the agent template. Let me just show you what I'm talking about first of all, so you can see what we're going to be building. If we jump over and take a look at one of our property entries, you can see this had all the details, description and so on. If we scroll down to the bottom, we've got the agent details block. And this is where we're going to use that relationship we just set up and created inside ACF. With that in place, we just need to make sure that we have that link and we have the template set up that'll do all the things that we want. So if we jump back over into our dashboard, into Anywhere Elementor template section, we're going to drop in the title for this. We're going to leave the edit with Elementor a second. We're going to come down to the Anywhere Elementor settings. Now this is where we can configure quite a few different things. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but we have two areas that we can choose at the moment, which is the render mode and the usage area. However, that second section will change based upon the render mode that we choose. So at the moment it says normal and usage area, nothing, none. So what that basically means is we would just be working with Elementor as we normally would. There would be no kind of link through to any Elementor settings. Now, if we click and change that, you can see we have a range of different options. What we want is the block layout. We're going to choose that, then it changes to preview post, and this is where we can preview one of the posts we want to work with. Expand that out. Now we've got to just start typing something in. So we're going to type in Betty, and you can see that now pulls up Betty Loop, which is the example that I just created for one of our agents. So I'm going to click on that, and that's now going to use that as the data we want to pull in, and it'll be used as the preview data when we're creating our template. So with that in place, we're simply going to hit publish, or save draft if you're working on a live site. It doesn't really matter too much which one we use. We're then going to come in and say edit with Elementor. Once we've done that, that'll take us into Elementor like you'd normally expect. Now, if you're wondering why my Elementor is dark, it's because we're using 2.8. This is now the latest version at the time of recording this video, and it allows us to kind of work in a slight dark mode. So we've got that set up. All we're going to do now is we're going to just change this so we've got a blank template. So we're going to come into the settings section. Underneath there, we're going to say the page layout. We're going to come into that and we're going to say Elementor Canvas. And we're just going to make sure that hide title is on as well. So that just gives us a completely blank canvas with nothing to get in the way when we're setting things up. Okay, so we can come back out of that now. We can come back into our widget chooser. So the first thing we're going to do is just put in a simple plain heading. And this is just going to be the title for this particular block. So we're just going to drag that over there and we're just going to drop in. And we're going to just change this to agent details. Oh, let's just change that to details. Okay, so we'll worry about styling that later. And now I've already gone ahead and done styling and so on. I'm going to copy those details over after I've shown you how to set it up. The styling is something you should be more than accustomed to when working with Elementor and Elementor Pro. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is now go through and start pulling in the details. So first thing, let's just come back over to our widgets and we're going to drop in an inner section. I'm going to drop that at the top. And we can style that and set that up however we want to. I'm going to simply come in and just leave it kind of as is at the moment. I'm just going to move this over a little bit and we're going to set this something like 20% over on the left hand side. That'll do. And from there now we can start pulling in the relevant details. So first thing we want is the actual photograph of the agent themselves. So we're going to come over to our widgets, and from here we're going to just choose one of the AE widgets. So we're going to type in AE, and that should then filter things down so you can see we've got all the AE widgets we want. So what we want is the post image. So we're going to drag that from there and drop it up into our area. And you can see that now pulls in the details. We can change the image thumbnail size, we can change it to whatever we want, the image alignment, whether you want to link it to something, all those kinds of good things. What we're going to do though is going to set this to be none. We don't want that to link through to anything. We can change the image ratio if we want to and all those kinds of details. So I'll just leave it as is. That looks perfectly fine for this. So once we've done that, we're now going to pull in some additional data. First thing you want to do is pull in the title. So in other words, the name of the person we're working with. So again, we're going to do AE. And from there, we're just going to pull in titles. We're going to drag and drop that over there. And you can see that pulls in the name of the individual. The next thing we need to do is insert the telephone number and the email address for this particular agent or any agent as part of this template. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over to our widgets on the left-hand side. And we're going to simply come in and search for custom. And from there, we want to make sure that we choose the AE custom field option. I'm going to drag and drop that over underneath their name. And from here, we can now go through the process of adding in the relevant different data. Now, you can see it says name and we've got my key. Well, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're using the right key for the specific field that we want to reference. Now, I know that my fields are agent_telephone, and you can see that immediately pulls in the phone number. However, if you're not too sure, there's a very easy way to find out any of the keys for any of these particular custom fields. All you need to do is head over into your dashboard, over into your custom fields, open up the field group that you want to reference, and then you'll see that next to every single one of the labels, we have the name, and this is basically what you want to copy. So you can see we've got agent_telephone, agent_email for the email section. So it's very easy. If you're ever unsure, simply have two windows open, or just use a notepad and just simply make a note of what any of these meta field names are. So with that in place, we've got the right field in there. We can now just go through and specify the different values for it. So at the moment it says type is set to default, and that will just simply output the text. However, what I want to do for this particular one, for the phone number, is I want to make it a link. And this just really means that if someone's on the website using a mobile phone, instead of them having to make a note and try to copy and paste that telephone number, they can simply click on it, it'll ask them if they want to dial, and then you just make their life a little bit easier. So what we need to do is change the type from default. We're going to change that to link. Once we do that, we now have extra options available. So what we need to do is tell it what kind of link this is. So we're going to open that up, and you can see we've got default, email, or telephone. So we're going to select telephone. That now sets that up to be a phone number. Links to static, where we can change that to whatever we want to. We'll just leave that as is though, because we want to use it with this link. Static text, we can basically leave all these values as they are. The only thing we want to change is the icon. And from there, we're going to come in and we're going to search for phone. Choose phone as the option, and you can see that now puts the phone in front of our telephone number. And we're pretty much done. That's all we needed to do. Obviously, we need to go through and style things, but we'll do that a little later on. And I'm going to do that behind the scenes so you don't have to watch me doing something you're probably more than comfortable doing. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing again. So we're going to come back up, we're going to choose custom, and then we're going to drag and drop in this custom field, and this is where we're going to put the email address in this time. So using the same logic, we just need first of all to take that name for that field. I'm going to take out the my key, we're going to drop in agent_email, and you can see again it pulls in the right data. Now I don't want to make this a link because that's the whole point of why we're going to have a form underneath. So we're going to leave that this time as just simple text. However, we're going to come down and change the HTML tag. I'm going to set that to be P for paragraph. And that will just make sure that the sizing is done nice and neat and tidy. So now we're going to put in the post data, in other words, the description of this particular agent. So we're going to come over and we're going to just do a search for content, and we want the AE post content. We're going to drop that underneath just to make sure as we want. There we go. As you can see, that pulls in the data. So we've pulled in all the dynamic data. The final thing we're going to do is create a contact form that'll link through to the email address of this particular agent. We don't want a sort of generic one. This is pretty straightforward. First thing we're going to do is just going to duplicate this heading. And we're going to pull that down underneath there. And we're going to say, inquire about this property. There we go. Let's just change that. There we go. Okay, so with that in place, we now need to drop a form in. So we're going to use the normal form that we have as part of Elementor Pro. So I'm going to drag and drop that underneath there. We can quickly style that up and put whatever we want in. We just simply want to create something very, very simple, and we want name, email, and phone number. So we're going to add an extra field in this. We'll duplicate the email. We'll change that to a phone, telephone. There we go. We're going to change that to phone, and we'll change the placeholder there to phone as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to set these to be 33%, so we can quickly make these all look nice and neat and tidy. A nice, simple, clean form that doesn't take up too much space on the page. Okay, so there we go. There's our basic form. And what we're going to do now is we're going to set up how we want this to be sent. Again, I'm going to come back in a little later and we'll style this all nice and neat and tidy. So what we want to do is we need to put in a hidden form first of all, which is going to be the details for the email address of the agent. So what we're going to do is going to add a new item inside there. From there, we're going to choose the type and we want to set this to be hidden. This is one of those really cool features inside the form editor inside Elementor Pro. You can do quite a lot of really cool things. So under content, we're going to leave that to hidden. We're going to put the label and we're just going to call this agent email. Then we're going to come over and just make sure we've got everything set up the way we need it to be. So under advanced, default type you can see is empty. We needed to change that now to be an ACF field. So we're going to scroll down, choose ACF field. Click on the little wrench icon, and from there we're going to say the agent's email. So that will now create that link through to the agent email. At the moment it says field 2, which doesn't really mean a lot to anybody. So we're going to change that just to make sure it makes more sense. We're going to call that agent email. And you can see that now gives us this short code. And this short code is what we need to be able to send this data through, or use the email address then as the sort of recipient. So with that all done, we're now ready to go ahead and just drop this in where we need it to be. So we're going to close this down, Come over to Action After Submit, and you can see we can choose email from there. Now, if you don't have email set up, which is normally the default, you can simply just click and choose what you want from there. What I would also recommend doing is to redirect this to another page and maybe even send a second email to the actual owner of the site so someone knows that something's been sent, or maybe even to the person that's sending the details through. Lots of different ways you could sort of set this up and make it as sort of user-friendly as possible. For this though, we're going to leave this set to email, then we're going to expand the email option out. Now at the moment it says to, and that's going to use the normal default admin address that's set up as part of WordPress when you create it or when you set it up and install it. We don't want that. We want this to be sent through to that email address for the actual agent. So we're going to do it, delete that from there, jump back out to our form fields, and from there we're going to open up the agent email advanced and make sure that we copy this shortcode. Once we've done that, we can simply come back out to the email tab, come into the to, and we're going to simply paste that inside there. That now is going to use the email address for the agent that's dynamically generated as part of this particular section, this template. Then you can go through and you can set any of the other parameters that you'd normally do. The thing I would recommend you change is the reply to, and we're going to set that to be email field. So when anybody receives a form from this, they can reply back to the person whose email address is actually inserted into the form. So it just makes the whole process easy. Once you've done that, you can come through and take off these various different things. Now, from GDPR point of view, I would definitely recommend you remove things like remote IP and so on. You only want to collect the bare minimum of information you need to fulfill the request of anybody sending this form through. Okay, so once we've done that, that's the form now pretty much all set up in place. The only thing that's left to do is just style everything to make it look nice and neat and tidy. And I'm going to do that now when I pause the video. So first of all, let's just hit on update. And that now is our template created for our agent that's going to be used as part of the individual property details section. So with that in place, I'm just going to simply come over and quickly style everything. Okay, so I've gone ahead, styled everything, and it's now the way I want it to look. So we've got that part done. The next thing we need to do, and to be able to use this template and to be able to use these relationships, is use Anywhere Elementor to create the actual single post type, the layout we're going to use when we look at an actual property. So what we're going to do is we're going to simply make sure we've updated this, got it saved out, and then we're going to exit back to our dashboard, and we're going to create our next Anywhere Elementor based template. Now, before we create that template, it's going to make our lives a little easier if we have at least one property listed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a property so we can use that to flesh out the template and have some dynamic data inserted into it. Just makes the whole process easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and first of all, we're going to set our property types. So from there, we're going to choose property type. And we're going to just keep this simple. We're just going to put in house. We'll leave everything else as it is, and we're simply going to come down and say add property type. So we now have a property type set up. Now we're going to come in and say add new for adding a new property. And now we can go through the process of adding the relevant data into our property just to make sure that we've got something listed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to come back once I put all that data in. Okay, so I've gone ahead, input some data, created our first property, and before I save that and publish it, I just want to show you a couple of things now we've started to add some data into not only our properties, but also into the actual agents. So all the normal things you'd expect to see, the name of the house, the description, and so on. We come down to our section then for property details. Underneath the basics tab, you can see we've got the price, the address, any of the features that are part of that property. You can also see that we've got the map, which is searchable and automatically pulls up the relevant data based upon the address that you put in, fully searchable. Come down, you'll see we have the property agents. So you can see all I need to do is click and choose any of the agents that are part of this particular property. So we know Betty Loop is going to be the one that's going to actually be the person selling this. So we're going to click on there. That'll then put it over to the right-hand side. She is now the agent that's part of this property. If we come back up and we go to the gallery section, you can see we've got a couple of images inside the gallery. So we've got a nice, simple, clean interface to work with. If we want to hide any of these extra features, we can simply come up to the top. We can say, well, we don't want some of these different things inside here, all these WPUF, these AE templates, and so on. And we get a nice, simple, clean interface. So with that in place, we're simply going to publish this, and we've now got at least one property that we can start to use as part of the templating. Okay, so let's come back over now into our AE templates and say add new. And from there, we're now going to go through the process of creating our template. So the template is simply going to be called property listing. So we're going to just put the title in there. Once we've done that, we're going to come down and we're going to go through and set up the Anywhere Elementor settings again. So like we saw when we created the agent template, we need to tell Anywhere Elementor what type of template are we going to be creating. So first thing we're going to do is change the render mode. At the moment it's still set to normal. However, we need to change that to the post template option. Click and you can see we have a lot of different choices. We're going to choose post template because what we're doing is we're creating that single post template. Next up, what's the post type? By default, it's going to choose posts. However, we want this to be properties. Going to click on that. Then we've got preview posts. And this is where it's a benefit to have at least one post for the template that you're going to create because it means that you'll have data to work with. Going to click on there and we're going to start typing in home. And you can see it pulls up homely house, which is what we just put in. Going to choose that. We're going to say auto apply to make sure that it applies this template to any of the properties. And then the template we're going to leave to theme default. So we've got the basics in place. We can now either hit publish or save draft. Save draft if you're working on a live site. We'll say publish because this is just a demonstration. And now we can go into Elementor and start working with that. So we can click to open with Elementor and we can start working with the editor to create the template and pull all the data that we want into it. So you can see it now pulls in the normal header and footer and the areas that we've got as part of our design. Just for simplicity, I'm going to get rid of those again. So we're going to come into the settings section. We're going to make sure that we've got this set to page layout is going to be Elementor Canvas. And if the title is still showing, we can just simply choose to hide the title as well. So we'll do that. We now have our nice, simple, clean blank canvas to work with. And we can go through the process now and start to fill out all the different areas. So first things first, we want to put in the title, the address, and also the price and the date that this was added. So we start by creating a simple one row, one column block. And inside there, we're going to drop in two sections for an inner section, but we're going to get rid of any spacing first of all. So select this and we're going to come over and we're just going to specify column gaps are going to be set to no gap. Come back out, drop an inner section inside there and leave that 50-50. And again, we're going to set this to have no gap. So we're going to select it. No column gaps. This just gives us full control over then how everything is going to be laid out. So let's start off by dropping in the title. What we're going to do is we're going to come over to the AE widgets and we're going to just pull in the AE title. Now we're going to use the Anywhere Elementor widgets for most of this because we want to make sure that everything we're doing is working flawlessly with the Anywhere Elementor plugin. So with that in place, you can see that pulls in the name of the property itself. Then underneath that, we're going to drop in the address. So again, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to come back over to our widgets, type in AE, and from there, we want to make sure that we use the AE, and we're looking for that custom field. So we're going to drop that inside there. Choose from the dynamic options. So we're just going to simply choose property address, which is the meta field name for the address of the property we're working with, and you can see that drops that inside there. We're going to change the HTML tag and set that to be P so we can control the styling on that. Now I'm not going to worry too much about the moment. We're going to go through and set the styling later on like I've done in the previous section because I don't want to bore you with just going through and just making things look nice and neat and pretty. So let's come over to the right hand side now. We're going to come onto there and we're going to do the same thing again. So we're going to come back over, we're going to search for ACF. And from there, we want to pull in the ACF field. So we're going to drop in an ACF field inside there. So now we can go through, configure things and specify exactly what's going to be used. And I'll tell you why we're using this plugin or this particular widget in a moment. So first thing I want to do is just drop in the field that I want, which is the price. And we're going to set the skin to be numeric or number. There we go. You can see that now pulls in the value and also puts in the comma for the 50,000 or whatever kind of numeric values we're working with. And this is one of the key reasons why we use this particular function, because it gives us more control over how we style the data that's being pulled up. So at the moment, the 50,000 doesn't mean anything. So we're going to put in a pound sign. So we're going to just drop in the pound sign for both the singular and the plural prefixes. And you can see now that pulls up and puts in the right data and the right value. We're going to set this to be right aligned, and that puts the price for this particular property over on the right hand side. Again, like I say, we'll style all this a little later. Next, we're going to come back out to our widgets again, and this time we're going to just choose post meta. And again, this is one of the AE widgets. We're going to drag that over, drop that on the right-hand side, and we're simply going to go through and choose what we want. So we don't want categories, we don't want tags, we don't want author, and we don't want comment. We only want to show the date. So with the date set, we can then go through and change anything that we want. So we're going to say, just get rid of this icon. We don't want the icon on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to specify that we want to put in the label is going to be added. And you can see that puts in added and then the date. And pretty much everything else is perfectly fine. The date, time publishing, you see that date type is date published, and also the date format. So we can change that if we want to, and you can see we've got a range of different options to choose from. However, I'll leave that as is, and we'll just make sure we disable the links. That doesn't try to link through to anything. And if we jump over the styles, we'll set that over to the right hand side as well. So that's put in the key data. We've got the title of the property, the address of the property, the price, and the date this particular property was added. Next up, we want to drop in the featured image for this particular property. What I'm going to do, first of all, is open up the navigator, because sometimes it makes it a little awkward to place things where we want them to be placed, especially when we have inner sections set up. So with that in place, it just means that I can make sure that this goes where I want it to go. So what I'm going to do is going to come over and we're going to search for post image. And there we go, there's our post image. And again, it's the Anywhere Elementor, because it's denoted by the AE at the beginning. So we're going to simply bring that over, drop that, not really where I want it to go. So what I need to do is just simply drag that down and position it underneath in the column. And you can see that now places it where I want it to be placed. Obviously, it's not looking the way we want it to at the moment, so we need to change some parameters for that. So where it says image size, we need to change that. I'm going to come up and we're going to set that to be full size. And there we go, that's put the full size image into place. If we want to now, we can specify anything else we want. So we'll just set this to be image aligned. We don't want this to link through to anything, because obviously this doesn't need to link through. It's just literally the image. So we're going to change that. We're going to say we want that set to none. If you want to set things like overlays and styles and all those kinds of things, you can do whatever you want there. But that's the basics now put into place. Next thing you want to do is drop in the description, some recently added, and the property location and so on, the details. And then finally, we're going to drop in the agent details at the bottom using that template we created in the previous step. So like we did earlier, we're just going to drop in another section now. So we're going to create a new section. So we're going to click. This time we want to make sure we have a 2-column setup. So we're going to have some details over on the right-hand side and the main description, property location and so on in this left-hand section. Let's add a little bit of spacing around that just so we give it a breathing space. I'm going to come up, we're going to have padding at the top set to 50, and we can worry about the bottom should we need to a little later. So let's put some breathing space in there. Next thing we're going to do is drop in the description over on this left-hand side. So we're going to just come back to our widgets, drop a heading inside there, and we're just going to put this as description. We'll set that to be heading 3, and we'll style that a little later on. We're also going to drop in something simple like a little separator line. So we're going to drop in a divider line there. I'll drop that in there. We'll just change the styling on that, get rid of the gap. That's okay. Right, so the next thing we want to do now is drop in the actual details for this particular property. So we're going to come back over, we're going to search for post content. And again, these are all AE, Anywhere Elementor widgets. We're going to drop that underneath that line, drop that in there, and you can see that now pulls in the relevant information. Next up, we want to pull in the property location. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to just duplicate this heading. So we're going to say duplicate that. We'll drop that underneath there. Change that to property location. Duplicate this line as well. So we'll just duplicate that and drop that down underneath. And now we can just take our map widget to drop in there. Let's just grab our Google Maps. So we'll just type in map, Google Map, and we're just going to simply drag and drop that down below the line. Okay, so what we need to do now is just change this to show the actual location. So we're going to click on dynamic, we're going to scroll down, find ACF field, and from there we're going to click on the little wrench icon and just come down and choose property address. Now don't worry if nothing's showing up for your actual property map when you're creating the template. Once you actually load this into the live site, you should find everything is perfectly fine. You can tend to find sometimes you'll have these little quirks when you're working with templates and any kind of plugin. Even Elementor Pro itself doesn't always show the data as you'd expect it to. So with that said, let's move on to the next section, which is going to be the property features. So we're going to do the same again. We're going to just duplicate this We'll just drag and drop that below, and we'll do the same thing for the line. We'll duplicate that just to make sure we have consistency. Okay, so let's just change that now to property features. Okay, so next thing we need to do is drop in another ACF field. So we're going to come back over and search for ACF. We're going to drop in the ACF fields and put that underneath there. Now with that in place, we can go through and tell it what we want to actually pull in. So this time we need to change the skin to something different again. So at the moment it says text. What we're going to do though is we're going to come down and choose checkbox, because this is the style we set things up inside ACF. We chose the options, the different features you can have as part of the property. They're all checkboxes, so you can just check off the various different features that are applicable. So once we've done that, we've got post field is fine for the source. We're going to come in and choose our field, which is property_features. Like I've showed you before, if you're ever stuck, simply come back over and you can just take a look under your ACF field groups, pull in the relevant data from there. So that pulls it in. You can see that pulls the data in. Doesn't necessarily look great at the moment, so we need to style things out a little bit. We're going to leave most of the values as they are. However, we're going to choose an icon, and we're just going to come on there and we're going to just type in check. Choose the checkbox, and you can see that now just puts a tick in front of all the things that actually show a value. Now, if you wanted to, you could also put in unchecked items. So you could have one color that's checked for anything that's actually included, and then you could have other things that are ghosted out in a light gray, for example, that don't have that feature, and you might have an X in there instead of a tick. It's up to you. For this, we just want to show the positives and not show the negatives. So that's with that in place. We've now got those relevant features in there. And then, like I say, if we wanted to, we could easily come in and we could fine tune. We can also go through the style things and do all those kinds of good things. For now, we're going to leave that as it is. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to duplicate these headings. We're going to duplicate these lines. Kind of getting repetitive here doing this kind of thing, but it just means that the whole process is just quick and pretty much painless. So let's just drop that underneath there. This time we're going to change that, and we're going to just change this to property gallery. Okay, so once we've done that, we're simply going to come over now and add in a gallery. So we're going to come over, hit our widgets, do search for gallery. And for this, we're going to use the default Elementor Pro gallery. It has a lot of nice features in there. Okay, so type is going to be single. We're going to change this now for dynamic. So we're going to click on dynamic. We're going to come over to ACF gallery field. Then we're going to click on the wrench icon and choose the gallery field we want, which is the property gallery. So we're going to choose that. Once we've done that, we can then close that down and we can set any parameters we want. So we're going to leave most things as they are. We're going to set the columns to be 3. Spacing is perfectly fine. Aspect ratio, we're going to set it to 1:1. And once we've done that, we're going to set this to medium large. So we've got the basic things set up in there, and if we want to change anything else like overlays and all those kinds of good things, we can do that as well. And like I say, you're not going to see anything at the moment until we actually pull in some live data. But there's our settings set up already now for us. We've got the key things that we wanted. We've got the details about the property. We've got the price, the date was added, the actual image, the featured image, the descriptions, and all those kinds of things. Let's just delete that from there. So let's just save this now and just test it out before we move on and add in the agent's details. So taking a look at our test site, you can see if we look at the property, all we're currently seeing is the title of the property or the name of the property and the description. So let's just refresh the page. We refresh that, and as you can see, absolutely nothing happens. There's one reason for that. Let's come back into our dashboard. When we're working with Anywhere Elementor Pro, we have to enable it to be supported by the theme that we're using. Otherwise, you're just going to see the normal default theme files. Even something as simple as using the Hello theme, which doesn't really have much in the way of theme files associated with it, still going to have that problem. So all we need to do is come out of our dashboard into the main area, come into the settings section for Anywhere Elementor Templates, and from there, we've got an option that just says Enable Theme Support. Click on that, hit Update. Once we've done that, come back over to our page and refresh, and we'll find now that starts to use our template, and you can see we now have all the relevant information. So we have the property gallery, we have the details about the property features, the address of the property, all those things are in place, just needing to be styled out. So what I'm going to do is jump back in now into the dashboard, and we'll take a look at how we add in the extra area specific to the actual agent that's selling the property. Okay, so let's add a new inner section, and this is where we're going to house the actual details for our agent. I'm going to get rid of this second column, so we're just going to delete that from there, And once we've done that, we're just going to simply select this and make sure that we have no column gap on there. Okay, so with that done, we now need to find a way of dropping in the details we want for the agent. To do that, we've got a dedicated widget. So we're going to come over and we're going to search for post blocks. And you can see we've got Anywhere Elementor post blocks. We're going to drag and drop that down into our new area. And the first thing it asks us to do is select our template. So if we take a look on the left-hand side, it says, what is the source for this particular template? By default, it's pulling in posts. However, we need to change that to relationship. So we're going to choose relationship. Then once you do that, you can see block layout. And it says select the template we want to use, basically. So we're going to choose that. And there's our agent template that we created earlier. Let's select that. And that now pulls in the basic area. However, the next thing we need to do is choose the relationship field. Now, what exactly is the relationship field? Well, it's exactly as its name suggests. It's the field that actually links the things through, the name of the relationship field that you created earlier as part of your advanced custom fields, meta fields. So let me just show you how you can find that data should you need to. We're going to open up our field groups. From there, we're going to choose the property details, open that up, and you can see there's our property agent, which is our relationship field. And the name of that field is property_agent. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy that from there. Once we've copied that, we're going to come back into our AE template. And from there, under the relationships fields, we're going to paste that in. And you should find then that that will pull the data in and start to display it as you'd expect to see it. So that's the data being pulled in. We just now need to go through and style the layout. So the moment you see it says columns is set to 3, we want to set that to be 1. And you can see that now pulls in our agent details, including the contact form, the contact details, phone number, all those kinds of things are set up directly inside there. So now you can go through and you can style this and configure this any way that you want to make sure that everything looks the way you expect it to and sits and fits nicely with your overall layout. So I'm quickly going to change a few things on here. I don't want the layout mode to be grid. I'm going to change that over to be list. So if we have more than one agent, we can display those. And just to make sure that everything else is set up the way that I want. Okay, so that's looking good. We're going to hit update on there. That will now save those changes. And what we're going to do is we're going to jump over and take a look at this to see how it's all working. Come back over. We're going to refresh this from its previous example. And we're going to just scroll up. You can see there's all our details, our description, our location map. And now we have our agent details at the bottom. Now, just to confirm this is all working the way we'd expect it to work, what we're going to do is come back over to our properties, come back in, and we're going to edit this. And from there, we're going to change the actual agent. We're going to save that to Dave Doe, update that, come back over to our test page once that's updated and refresh. And we should then find Dave Doe is the actual person that's going to be representing us to sell this property. So you can see we've created that relationship, we've linked everything through, we've created the form, done all those kinds of good things. All we need to do now is quickly go through, style everything, and I'm going to show you just a couple more things to drop in on the right-hand column section before we move on to the next stage as part of this tutorial. Now we're nearly at the end of this section where we've gone over Anywhere Elementor and setting things up. All I want to do now is add in the recently added option on the right hand side. This is something that's purely optional. You can skip this step if you want to, but it's a nice way of letting people see the recent additions to your website, whatever that kind of website actually entails. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to drop in a heading. So we're going to duplicate this. We'll drag and drop that over onto this right hand section. That drops that into there. Next up, we're going to come in and we're going to just add in a edit post section or a post section. So we're going to come back over to our widgets, going to search for posts. From there, we're going to drag in the posts option, drop that underneath description, change description to be recently added. There we go. And we just need to change this then from just being the normal looking at the actual posts and choose our custom post type. So classic is perfectly fine for this. We're going to set columns to be 1. We're going to say post per page. We're going to set that to be 4. Choose medium large for our images. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down into our query section. And from there, we're going to tell it what we actually want to display. So at the moment it's choosing posts. We want to change that to properties. And you can see that pulls in the only property we currently have, which obviously we don't necessarily want to include this specific property that we're looking at. So we can, if we want to, change things on that. Head over to the exclude option, and from there, we're just going to click and we're going to say current post. So that means we won't actually see anything on there when we've got this on a live site. So that's pretty good. And we'll also say avoid duplicates just to make sure we don't end up with any duplicate content on there. Now what you can do is you can go through and you can just style everything the way that you want it to be. So again, like I say, I'm going to come back out of this and I'll style the way this all looks. But what you'll find is when we start to add in additional entries, we'll start to see more data in there. What we are going to do though is take off some of this extra stuff we don't really want. We don't want comments. We don't want the date that this was added in there. We don't want the excerpt. We just want the title and we don't want read more. So what we're going to see is we're going to see the actual property photograph and the name of the property. And that's pretty much all we're going to see. So we're going to quickly style this column so everything looks nice and neat and tidy. And then we are pretty much done with this template. And there we go. With our little bit of styling added, you can see there's our property. All the details are in place. I've added another property and now so you can see we've got a recently added. All the details are there. If we want to, we can come and take a look at this recently added property, jump over to that one, and you'll see all the things are laid out the way we'd expect, and the recently added properties will show the homely house, which is what we just added in there. So very, very straightforward, but also a lot of really useful, powerful techniques have been covered in this particular section. So the next thing we're going to do is open up Elementor Custom Skin. This is the free plugin that allows us to create custom loop items. Now, if you've never seen this before, it's basically just a way of creating the individual listing items on our archive pages, and we can then pull through data from things like advanced custom fields, specific data that we want for our particular property listing, and then we can display that in our archive post. So let's just jump over into the dashboard and open up that and start building our custom loop. Elementor Custom Skin makes dealing with the loop inside WordPress very easy, especially when you want to target things like advanced custom fields. To do that, we're going to come at the template section and come down to Theme Builder. And once we're inside the Theme Builder, you'll see a new tab called Loop. Now this is installed as part of the plugin itself, so unless you have that plugin installed, you won't see the loop option. However, with it installed, we can now create our custom loop. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to come up and say add new. From there, we're going to select the type we want, which is loop, and we're going to give this a name, and we're going to call this default property loop. We've named that. We're going to say create template, and that'll take us into the Elementor editor that we'd normally expect to see. Now, when you're creating your custom loop item, you're creating just one instance of that. Now, I've covered this in its own dedicated tutorial, so if you want to check that out and learn more about this particular plugin, check out the description below. I'll put a link in there so you can hop over and take a look at that once you've finished working through this tutorial. Okay, so once we've done that, we're now going to get rid of this area. We don't want any of the predefined templates, so we're going to close that down, and we now have the normal editor. Now, to make life easier, we're not going to be using the header and footer sections in this, so I can easily get rid of those by coming to the settings section, and from there we're going to say page layout. We're going to change that over to Elementor Canvas. That gives us a completely blank page and just makes the whole process a lot easier. Next, we're going to come to the preview settings, and we're going to specify what we want to use to preview the data. Now, at the moment, you can see it's trying to pull in the hello world, which is a normal post. But because we're creating a custom loop for our properties, we want to change that over so we can view some property data. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this arrow, and you can see that when we create our custom post types, they become available inside this preview section. So we're going to come down and choose property, and from there we can choose any of the properties we've already got. So let's start typing in one of the names, and you can see there's our stack apartment. So we're going to click on that, say apply and preview. Now obviously nothing's going to show up because we haven't started creating the template yet for our loop. Once we do, we'll actually have some proper live data to use to test out. Okay, now we could, if we wanted to, just use the featured image inside this section for the first part, which is going to be the image of the property that we're taking a look at. And that's perfectly fine. But because you've got Anywhere Elementor installed, we can actually use some of the advanced functions inside there. So what we're going to do is we're going to just do AE to search through for that. And we're going to come down and we're going to make sure we pull in the Anywhere Elementor featured image. So what we're going to do is we say we're going to pull in this post image, drag and drop that over onto our page, and you see this now drops in the image. Currently it's using the thumbnail, so we're going to change that over to a larger version. So we go for medium large, so we get a nice resolution version, and we'll pop that into the middle. You've then got the option to link through. So in other words, we're making this a linkable image, so we can click and jump over to that particular property. So we're going to say yes, we want that. We're also going to specify that post is perfectly fine. So we want that. You could, if you wanted to, you could set this to none if you didn't want the image to be clickable, or you could just allow the end user to click and see the full version of the image. But it just makes more sense to use post. We're also going to use the overlay option. Now this means that we can just create an overlay over the top of our image and just make things look a little nicer. Now you can see at the moment it says show overlay never. We're going to click on there and you can see we have three options. We're going to choose the always option so we can end up with a gradient overlay. Now currently this is a solid overlay, so you can see we just need to change that. So we're going to come out of the style section, and from there we can just choose any of the settings we want. So we're going to change this from a solid, we're going to go to gradient, and we're just going to change that gradient over. So color for the first one, that doesn't really matter too much. We're going to set that to be 100% transparent. I'm going to come down then to the second color, and we're going to set that to be black, and we'll just make sure that the opacity is set as we want it to be. Okay, so that gives us a little bit of a gradient over there now. So if we wanted to put things like little labels over the top of this for things like on sale, special, featured, and so on, we could add that in there, and it gives us a nice overlay so they will stand out from the background. So it's more of a visual thing than anything else. If you want to, you can also come in and tweak any of the values you want to on here. So we're just going to adjust this a little bit, set that to about 80, and everything else looks fine. So we now got a darker section at the bottom. So there's the first part. The next thing we're going to do now is go and put in some data that's specific to this property that just tells people what it's called, the location, and the price. Come back over to the left hand side. We're going to click to open up all our widgets again, and if we want to, we can now use any of these single post options, so things like post title, excerpt, and so on. So let's start by just dropping in the post title. So I'm going to drag that, drop that onto our page, and you can see that now pulls in the name of this particular property. Obviously we can go through and style things on there. We're going to change the heading now from a H1 because it's not that important on the page. We're going to set that to H4, and later we'll come back and we'll style this up. Next up, we're going to come over and we're going to add another widget in. So we're going to come in, we're going to scroll down, and we're going to grab the text editor, drag and drop that underneath. And from there, we're going to use the dynamic option that allows us to pull in whatever dynamic data that we want. So what we're going to do, we're going to click on there, we're going to scroll down to the bottom, and we're going to choose ACF field. Once we've done that, we can now choose the little wrench icon and click and choose what ACF key field we want to use. So for this, we're going to pull in the address. So we're going to scroll through and we say this property address. So we're going to click on that, give it a second or so, and you can see that now pulls in the data. If we want to, we could put anything before, after, or put a fallback value in there. It's entirely up to you what you want to do. I'm going to leave it as it is for now. And we're going to close that down. So next up, we're going to just drop in another one. So we're going to come back over, scroll down until we get to the Anywhere Elementor fields. And we're going to do the same as we did earlier on where we created the Anywhere Elementor single post where we wanted to pull in the price. So we're going to grab the relevant field for that. So what we want is the ACF fields. So we're going to find that, ACF fields, drag that over underneath our location, and from there we're now going to go through and specify the different settings. So like we did in the previous template, we're going to come down and choose number as the option. Post field is perfectly fine, and then the field, if you remember from the previous one, was property underscore price. You see that now pulls in the price details, so we now got 800,000 with the comma separator. All we need to do now is just simply drop in the singular and the plural prefixes for the pound sign or whatever currency you're working with for your particular site. So we've now created our basic loop item. We can go through and style this a little later, but all I'm going to do now is set this up and show you how it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit publish on here. It says add a condition. Now normally you'd expect to add a condition, but because we're using this as a custom loop, there's no condition to apply. What we're going to do is hit save and close, and we've created the actual loop item. So now we've done that, we need to go through and create the archive page inside the normal template setup as part of Elementor Pro. So now that we've gone ahead and used Elementor Custom Skin to create our custom loop item, we can now build out the template file using Elementor Pro's theme builder and start building out our archive template, specifically using that loop and pulling in the data that we want, including things like price and so on. So let's just jump over into the theme builder of Elementor and start creating that template. To start building the template for our archive, all we need to do is come over into the template section, come down to the theme builder, and from there we can start building things out. So we're going to jump to the archives tab, and from there we're going to say add new archive. Now if you've already created an archive, you're just going to see the option to add a new one in. You won't see that first option like we just saw. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to call this default property archive. I'm going to say create template. Now our archive page is going to be a 2-in-1 column. On the one side, we're going to have a little section where we can put the filters and the search. The other side, the main section, is where we're going to see the properties. So we're going to close this down. We're going to create our own custom layout. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over, we're going to say we want to add a new section, and we're going to call this a section, which is a 2-column section. We're going to click, and we're simply going to come with the advanced, and we're going to come into our padding, and we're going to add some space at the top and bottom. So we're going to put 50 pixels above, 50 pixels below. So we're going to leave this left-hand column for now. That's where we're going to put in our filters and our search and so on. What we want to do now on the right-hand side is drop in the archive listing. To do that, we're going to come back over to our widgets on the left-hand side, and you can see because we're creating an archive, we're going to go through and we have 3 options: the title, the archive posts, and the author box. Now if we drag over the archive posts and drop that into the right-hand section, you can see it pulls in by default the actual normal posts, not our custom post type showing our properties. So we can change that as we've always done. I'm going to come into the settings option, the bottom left-hand corner, come to our preview settings, and we're going to change that from recent posts or whatever may be in there. And we simply want to scroll down until we find our property archive. Click on there, apply and preview, and we should then find that will start pulling in the relevant data. And there we go. You can see we've now pulled in 2 pieces of information, the 2 properties we currently have listed. However, what's happening is it's using a default layout. So we need to tell it to use our custom loop. To do that, we're simply going to select the widget again, and from the left-hand column where it says skin, we're going to change that from classic or from anything else that may be in there, and what we want is custom. Once we open the custom option up, you can see it now says select a default template. In other words, please choose what template that you've created to use. So we're going to click on there, and we've only got the default property loop. Once we click on that, that will then load in our styling. So you can see that's loaded that in, and we can now come through and customize things. So if we want to, we can come in and specify how many columns. We can go through and do anything else we want to set things up. If we went pro, we'd have extra options available. So there's a pro version of Elementor Custom Skin. Put a link to that in the description, so if you want to grab that, where you can do nice simple things like equal height layouts and so on, that could be something that's very useful for you. But as it is, like I say, we're going to keep this really simple. You can get away with using the free version for most parts. Next up, we're going to come to the Facet WP, and you can see under there we've got options to enable this. Now, because we're going to be using this particular page to do filtering on, we need to enable Facet WP. Even though we haven't put it on yet, we need to make sure it is enabled. So we're going to select that, enable it, and now we can start to use that inside our template. Next up, you've got your pagination options, and this is where you can choose when you have lots more properties in there, you can choose exactly how to paginate to go to the next page, the previous page, and so on. So you can set this up in a range of different ways. I'm not going to bore you by going through that. If you're used to working with Elementor Pro and the template structure, then you should be used to working with these kinds of things. So we've got the basics in there now. Our properties are in there. We've got our custom layout for this. If we want to go in and edit anything on there to just change the way things look, add extra content in, any advanced custom fields we want, we can simply go back into our custom loop and make changes inside there. But effectively, that's the basic starting points for our archive page. The final thing we need to do is just publish this page and set the conditions that we want for where to use it. So we'll come over, click on publish, click to add a condition in, and we don't want to use this on all archives. We're going to click to open that up, scroll down, and you can see we can come down to the properties archive, and from there we're going to say we only want to use this for the properties archive. Click on there, save and close. If you wanted to add a second or third condition in, if you want to use this in other places like search results and things, you could do that directly inside here by just simply adding another condition in to use it on those relevant pages. We'll just hit save and close, and we've now created the archive page ready to go through and add in our filters and our searches. Okay, so we're getting close to the end now of this video tutorial, but one of the areas we really need to focus on is the filtering and searching of our properties. Now we're going to be using 2 plugins for this. We're going to be using Facet WP to do all the filtering, and we're going to link that through to Search WP, which expands what you can do with Facet WP and allows you to create more complex searches, applying various different weights to the different kind of areas, titles, descriptions, property details, and so on. So you can make sure that when someone's searching, they can find the relevant data quickly and easily. This is going to be something that works well with larger databases, so if you have a lot of properties, this is something that's going to speed up the process of allowing the end user to search and to filter. So let's just jump back over to the dashboard now, start setting up Facet WP, linking it through with Search WP, and how we get that entire search and filtering setup as part of our website. So if we take this page as an example of what we're going to create, you can see the kind of things that we're going to put together. We've got 3 distinct sections in this example, but obviously you could expand this to anything you want. We've got a search at the top which links up Facet WP and Search WP together, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. We've got a filter then for the amount of money any particular property costs, which is a live filter. So you can see when we adjust that, it'll then start to filter out live in real time. We can also use that in conjunction with the search and also with this hierarchical filter below. Now, this is one of those areas that a lot of people have asked about, is how do you go about setting these things up? So let me show you an example of this hierarchical search. If we open the first option up, you can see currently we only have residential as an option because we've got things set up in this test site as commercial properties and residential properties. That's just done through a taxonomy, so you can set that up if you want to expand things out. Underneath that, we've then got 2 other filter options, which you can see currently are grayed out and we can't actually click on them to do anything because they're reliant upon this first filter. So what we're going to choose residential. Once we do that, that will then filter through to show any residential properties, which currently are all the properties in this demo site. Now we've got the option for the second drop-down list, where we can now go through and filter based upon different criteria, again, using a taxonomy. So you've got apartments, bungalows, and houses. If we choose bungalow, you can see that will filter that out and we only see the bungalow. And then the third and final option comes up with additional things. So again, this is just a hierarchical way of filtering things down to get exactly what you want. You don't have to use all 3. You can use 1, 2, or 3 in this example. And like I say, you can, if you want, to use them in conjunction with the other filters and also the search. So this is what we're going to do. So we jump back over into the plugin section. You can see we've got 3 different Facet WP things installed. We've got the main key Facet WP plugin. We've got the Elementor add-on and the Hierarchy Select. The Hierarchy Select has to be installed if you want to use this hierarchical based filtering. We've also got Search WP installed. So now we've got those installed, activated and set up. The next stage is to go through and start setting up our facets. Now, when we're setting up our hierarchical select, we need to make sure that our data structure is all configured correctly. So if we come back to our property section and come down to property types, we'll see currently we have apartment and house. These are both key sort of parent categories. In other words, there's nothing else below them. They have no child categories. Now, in the example we took a look at originally, the residential and commercial sections, these would be top level categories. And underneath there, we'd have, underneath residential, we'd have bungalows, houses, apartments, and so on. And then we could break it down further. So let's do that now. So let's just change what we currently have. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add in what we're going to consider to be a new parent section, a new parent category. So we're going to call this flats. We're going to leave the parent property type to none. Now you can ignore these AE Pro Global templates and the dynamic templates and so on. This is just some extra functionality that's been added in with some of the plugins like Anywhere Elementor Pro and so on. We don't need to set anything up inside there. So we say add new property type. And then we've added that in, but we want to make apartments sit underneath flats. So to do that, we're simply going to click on edit. And once that opens up, we're going to just tell it that the parent property type is now going to be flats. So we're going to update that. And we've now started to create our hierarchy. To come back to our property categories, you can see we have flats and we have apartment. If we want to, we can add another section in there and we could just call this bed sits. Make that all one word. And we can do property type underneath flats. And again, we just add property type. So we've now started to create a hierarchy. You can create these as deep as you'd want to go, but don't go crazy with it and end up with like 5 or 6 different subsections. It all starts to get a little bit convoluted then. So I'm going to add a couple more sections and subsections into our property types. Then we're going to take a look at that just to recap, and then we'll move on to start working with setting up our hierarchical facets, our searches, and so on. So there we go. I've added in some extra sections. You can see we've got parents, which are flats and houses, and then we have subsections or child elements, apartments, bedsits, bungalows, townhouses, terraced houses, and so on. Now this also reflects when we take a look at adding or editing properties. So if we come over to one of our property listings, you'll see now, because we set up our custom post type and our taxonomies to be hierarchical, we now have this hierarchy available to us inside here. So we can, if we want to, come in and just set things up to get exactly where we want these to be. So homely house is fine, and we're going to say that's a terraced house. You can see we can update that. So we've now set that into 2 sections. So when we filter things out, it'll then show up in 2 key different sections. So that's the basics of setting up our different hierarchy for our property types. The next thing we need to do is come into our settings section, and from there we're going to come into facet WP. Open that up and you can see it already has 1 sample facet installed. We're going to get rid of that. We don't need that. So we're going to close that, get rid of it, say we don't want it, and we're going to say we want to add a new facet. So from here we can now go through and set up what facets we want. So for this one we're just going to call this hierarchy, and you can see we then have the option for the facet type. Now as long as you've got the hierarchy installed, the extra add-on for it, you'll see hierarchy as an option and also hierarchy select. So we're going to choose hierarchy select, and from there it says what's your data source. In other words, where do we want to pull this information that's going to populate our hierarchical select boxes. At the moment it says post type, however we need to change that, and what we want in there is the property types. So let's just start searching. And we'll just type in property, and you can see we've got a range of different options for property. We come down to the taxonomies, which is where we've got those set up. We have property types, and we'll select that. So let me just recap quickly what we're doing here. The label is just the name we're going to use to reference this particular facet, so make sure they're always unique. The facet type is the type of facet or search or filter that we're going to use. In this example, we're going to use that hierarchy select, so it'll be simple select drop-down lists. The next option is the data source, where we're going to pull the information from to actually populate our hierarchical select sections, and that's basically it. The next option we have is sort by. We can come in and we can choose highest count, display value, or raw value. We're going to just set that to be raw value. And we don't need to worry about adding any depth labels in. We're going to leave that as it is. So what we're going to do now is save the changes, and we're going to hit re-index. And what that's going to do is that's going to go and take a look at all the data on our site and just index everything that's currently installed as part of our content. So in other words, all the properties we currently have listed. Now, if you want to check these out, the easiest way to do it is come back to our facets, and inside there you can see we've got hierarchy. It tells us that the type is hierarchy select, the source, where it's coming from, and finally the number of rows that have been indexed. So it currently has 4 results for our properties. Now the reason for this, it says 4, even though we only have a couple of properties, we don't have 4 properties listed, is because the properties we do have listed appear in 4 distinct different categories. So if you have a property that's in 2 categories, that will show up as 2 results. So if you see the disparity between the number of properties you have listed and the number of rows, that's more than likely the reason why. So that's the first of our facets done. So what we can do is we can come back into our facet select, and when we copy the shortcode, this is what we're going to use to actually populate that filter section on the left hand side of our archive page. So what we're going to do, copy the shortcode. That's now copied that in, so we have the shortcode available to us. We can now use that inside our template. So the next thing we have to do is come out to our template section and come into our theme builder. From there, we want to find the property archive. I'm going to hit edit with Elementor to open that up. Once we've done that, loaded Elementor in, we can start putting these into the left-hand column, start building out our filter section. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to the left-hand side, we're going to search for shortcode, and then we're simply going to drag and drop that over into the left-hand column. This now allows us to drop in that shortcode that we've copied. So all we're going to do is right-click and choose paste, and you can see there's our shortcode for that facet. Now, we hit apply. Even though we've added that in there, we won't actually see anything at the moment because it doesn't have any data to pull in. And basically what happens is we just get this empty placeholder for this shortcode. We need to go and actually test this on the page itself. Now, the most important thing you need to do when you're working with this is making sure that this section on the right-hand side, which is where all the data will actually be displayed, has been set up to use facet WP. So if you haven't done that, if you missed this in the previous section, we built this archive, select the data source, which in other words is going to be this archive post section, come to the left-hand side and you'll see we've got a section on there called facet WP. Expand that out and make sure that's selected and switched on. As long as you've done that, we should have everything in place. So we're going to update this page, and then we're going to take a look at this in action. So let's hop over and take a look at the preview. So we're going to click on the preview option, hit preview to open a new tab. And once you've done that, we now have our two apartments or our two properties listed on the right-hand side. Our filter is now set up with those two levels of hierarchy. If we click, you can see we've got a flat and we've got a house. If we click on houses, that will filter things down and show us only the house. And we click the next option, you can see we currently have only one subsection inside there, which is for a terraced house. So we've seen that this is now working. We can come back later and style this and update any styling we want to make sure it fits in perfectly. But that's the first facet. We've now created a hierarchical filter setup. So that first step, that's pretty cool and something that I know a lot of you have asked for on how do you do it. Well, there's a great example of how you can use that. But the best thing is, this will all link through with the other filters we use as well, so we can combine all of these to create way more complex filtering and searching options, all done inside Facet WP and Search WP. Okay, so we've done that. We're going to close this down, come back in now, and we're just going to close this up a little bit to give us a bit more room on the right-hand side. So we're going to set that to about 25%. We don't need so much room for our filtering. Update our page. What we're going to do now, we finished with that, we're going to come back out, exit back to our dashboard, and from our dashboard, we're going to come back into our Facet WP settings. So over to settings, back down to Facet WP, and now we can create the next facet. So the next one we're going to do is we're going to create a price slider, which allows us to just simply have a visual way of filtering out a bottom price and a top price. So we're going to say add a new facet again. First thing we're going to do is put the name for this in, which is just going to be price. Facet type, we're going to change that and we want slider. And then see again, we've got the data source. Post type, well, we don't need that. We need to change this over to our property price. So let's just search for price. And there's our field, advanced custom fields, or the property price underneath. They're both pretty much exactly the same thing. So we're going to say property price is what we want. Or the data source, we don't need to worry. The prefix is what we're going to use before the actual numeric filter. Now, because I'm working with pounds in the UK, I'm going to put the pound symbol in there. But obviously, if you're working with a different currency or different numeric values, you could put either a prefix and or a suffix. Suffix just basically means it goes after the numbers, prefix prior to the numbers. We've then got the format. Now you can set this up however you want and depends upon the kind of values you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with massive values, then you can set that up in a much more readable format. Or if you're working with smaller values, again, in a readable format that's specific to what you're looking to do. The step then is how big each of the increments on the slider is going to be. So I'm going to set that to 1,000, but you could set that to 10,000, 1, 10, whatever you kind of want. So that's the basics. We've created that. So again, we're going to hit Save Changes, hit the re-index to make sure it goes through and re-indexes and finds that new facet and looks for any data that will be inside that facet and applicable. And then we can come over and we say, copy the shortcode. So we've copied that shortcode. So they're just repeating the same thing again. Now I'm going to come back into templates, into our theme builder. From our theme builder, back in and edit with Elementor for our property archive. And from there, we're going to drop in another shortcode widget. So let's just search for that shortcode, drag and drop that. We're going to put that above the filter this time. And again, we're going to come in, I'm going to right click and we're going to paste that in there. So there's our new facet. Again, you can see it uses a pretty straightforward format. We can apply that if we want to. And we'll hit update to make sure that that's now been added in. And we can now jump over again and test that out to make sure that everything is working the way we expect it to. So let's just preview our page, open that new tab, and you see there's our slider. Now we have quite a big disparity between the prices of these. You've got the 800,000 and the 50,000. So if we take that past 50,000, you can see that will immediately drop off that one because it's no longer inside the range value that we want. If we pull this underneath, you'll see we get rid of everything and it says we can't find anything that kind of matches your criteria. So we'll hit reset on there and it pulls everything back. So now we've got two of our filters. The third and final one we're going to use in this example is the search. We need to link that through to Search WP to open up more options and give us the ability to search through our custom data that's part of advanced custom fields and custom post types. Now out of the box, WordPress does not allow you to search against content that's created as custom post types and or ACF fields. We need to have that added in, and Search WP is a great way of opening up those search result options. So then we finish with this template for the moment. Let's just close this down, exit to our dashboard. I'm going to come over and set things up now inside Search WP. So again, into the settings and choose Search WP this time. And from there, we now have the ability to go through and set up how and what we want to search against. Now, depending upon the type of site that you're creating and the content that you have on there will dictate what kind of things you want to search against. Now, you can see by default, it's going to search on the posts and the pages, which are your standard content as part of WordPress itself. For this example, because we're not going to be using those pages and posts for anything at all, we're just going to be using our custom post types, we're going to get rid of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click, and I'm just going to say exclude, and this same again for pages, we're going to exclude that. We're going to say add post type. I'm going to click on there, and you can see this gives us all of the options of the post types that we can use. You can see there's quite a few things that are automatically excluded, and we're going to leave those as they are. All we want to do is come in and say properties. So this just means that we're only going to be able to search against properties as part of the content. If we expand that from there, you can see we now have the ability to go through and specify weight multipliers. In other words, what are we going to consider to be the most important aspects to search against from our custom post type? Now, by default, you can see it pulls in things like titles, content, the slug. But we can, if we want to, add in additional attributes. So if we click on Add Attribute, you can see we can choose from taxonomies and or custom fields. So for this example, let's just say we're going to search against a taxonomy. We're going to click on there. It says, what taxonomy do you want to search against? So I'm going to click to open that up, and you can see there's our custom taxonomy of property types. So we can add that in there, and we can specify the weight for that. So we can say, how important is this going to be when you're searching against things? So we can easily come in and adjust this. So we're going to say we want the title to be pretty important. So we're going to set that to about 90. So that gives that quite a lot of weight. The content, well, that still needs to be important. So we're going to set that up to 35. The slug, not really important. And the slug is just basically the nice friendly URL for that particular page. So there could be a useful keyword or something in there that people could search against. But again, like I say, it's one of those things. It comes down to how important you feel it is. Now you can, like I say, come through and keep on adding custom fields, adding taxonomies, anything that's available to you as part of this custom post type underneath the properties section until you've got all of the data that you want to be able to search against all listed inside there. Now if we take a look on the right hand side, you can see we've got the index progress and we've got the last activity, which tells us what's indexed, what's unindexed, and main row count. So we're going to save the search engine. Once we've done that, now you can see it tells us that's been saved. It's going to automatically go through and index our content. So it's telling us the last activity is right now. It's indexed 2 entries because we have 2 properties listed. And remember, we're only looking at the properties section, not posts or pages. It tells us then that unindexed is nothing that's been unindexed. And we've got main row count of 115 rows. So we've done what we need to do inside this. That's the first key part of this done. Now, that's not all we can do when we want to configure this to make sure it searches and finds what we want people to find. We also have things like exclude IDs. We can add limits or exclude rules to various different things. So if we want to, we could say exclude by taxonomy, and we can click on there and it says choose your taxonomy. We've only got the one currently. So you can see we open that up. It says exclude property types. So we could, if we wanted to, come in and start searching for things. So if we said type in bungalow, you can see that would now exclude that property type. So we could set this up to only include various different kinds of property types. Again, we've got a range of things. So if we wanted to, we could also say limit by taxonomy as opposed to exclude by taxonomy. So there's a lot of options inside here to get this to go through and just basically find exactly what you want the end user to find. We've also got more options. So if we jump out to the advanced section, you can see we can say search term handling. We've got stop words and we've got synonyms. So in other words, words which would normally stop things. In other words, very common words like again, about, above, and so on. So we can, if we want to, add more in here, or we can take things away. We've also got synonyms. So you can see we can add our own synonyms if we want to. So in other words, synonyms allow replacement of search terms. So if you want to find out more information about how to use that, you can do that from there. So that gives us a lot of options. We also have actions and settings on the right-hand side. So you can see we've got things like debugging enabled. So if you're running this and you're finding you're having a problem, then you can put debugging on there and you can find out debugging information. However, there's a couple of things that I want to set up in here. We want to have automatic did you mean corrections. That's quite useful. So say search with no results will automatically output results for the closest index match, and a note will be enabled in the loop. Again, if you want to find out more about that, you can do that. We'll say highlight terms in results. And finally say remove all data on uninstall. So in other words, if we want to remove this plugin for any reason because we're testing it out, it isn't doing what we want, by removing it, all of the data that's associated with this plugin will also be stripped out, which means we don't end up with a pile of fluff left in the database that can cause things to slow down. Now, this is something that all plugins really need to have. Then we've got the engine configuration transfer. If we'd set things up in a previous website and we wanted to transfer that over, we could import and or export the data from here. So that's quite useful. So once we're done with that, we've pretty much set everything up. So we'll say save if we've done any changes on there. I'll come back over to settings and we've got pretty much everything is done. So we'll save that just to double check to make sure that everything is in place. And we've now set up our search. We now need to go ahead and add that as part of Facet WP. So how do we do that? We'll take a look at that next. So let's just hop back over into Facet WP so we can come into there. What you're going to do is we're going to make sure that we've got everything set up the way we want it to be. So we're going to set up our first search. We're going to add a new facet, and from there we're going to call this search, but I'm going to just use an abbreviation because I don't want to cause any potential problems if the term search is used somewhere else. Facet type, we're going to change that from checkboxes and we're going to find the option for search. So we're going to click on that. Now it says the search engine is the WordPress default. In other words, it's only going to use the normal WordPress search options, which means that it won't find data from our ACF fields. So what we need to do is going to change that, and because we have Search WP installed, we're going to click on Search WP. Now it's going to use that data from that search, which allows us to go through and search using all the settings we've just configured. Placeholder text, in other words, what do you want to put into the search box itself? I'm going to use something like find your happy place, which is kind of akin to what you'd be doing if you're looking for a new house. And we're going to say we want auto refresh, so it'll automatically refresh any updates. So automatically refresh the results while typing. So it can be quite useful to update those results as it goes along. Save the changes. Once that's finished saving, we're going to hit reindex, let that run through and just reindex the content on our site. And we're also going to do the copy shortcode. So we're going to say copy shortcode, jump back into our template section and into theme builder, into our property archive and open that up with Elementor. And we're just going to put in another shortcode widget and just going to search for that. And we'll just drop that at the top this time. And right click, paste, and there's our search. Hit apply. Once that's finished, hit update, and we should now find that our search is all set up. So as we did before, let's come through and just preview this page, and we should find now there's our search option. So if we click in there and we'll just start typing stack, we see that now filters it out, showing the results for stack. So you can see we've got stack apartments. So pretty cool. And again, like I say, if we've typed something in and we've got more results, we'll have options then for the slider, for the values, and also for these filters underneath. So you can see it's already gone through and filtered this down now to show only flats. But if we had multiple different results that all started with stack, for example, then we'd have these filters available, so we could then sub-filter it down even further to get exactly what we want from the results of all the properties inside our database. So one of the other questions that came up in the original video and also in the business listings video was, how do you go about allowing an end user, someone who's not an admin or someone, a content user inside your website, to add in a listing of their own? Well, in this section, I'm going to show you how we can do that. Again, we are going to be using a commercial plugin, and I'm going to be showing you the basics of how you can do this. If you want to add in extra functionality, things like making people pay for adding listings and so on, and manage their own listings, this plugin can do it, but we're not going to cover that in this particular tutorial. That's something I'll take a look at in its own dedicated tutorial if you'd like to see more about that specific functionality. If you would, let me know in the comment section below. I'll take a look at creating content specifically on that. Okay, so we're going to be using WP User Frontend Pro to do this. So we're going to jump back over to the dashboard. We've got it installed. We're going to go through the process of adding that in and linking it through to our data. So let's take a look at doing that now. So we're now ready to start building that first form to allow us to submit actual content through on our website. What we need to do, come over to User Frontend. We're going to set up a couple of settings first of all. So going to come to the settings section, and you can see we've got a lot of different tabs. Most important thing we need to do to start off with is set the ACF compatibility. We need to set that to be yes. Otherwise, we can't link this through to our advanced custom fields. Obviously, there's a lot of other settings inside here as well, which I would recommend that if you are going to use this plugin, that you take your time to go through and have a check to see all the things are set up the way that you want. We're going to hit Save Changes on there. Now, for this example, I'm not going to go through the process of setting things up where people can pay to have their listings and so on. That's something that if you're interested, let me know. I'll take a look at doing a dedicated video just to working with User Frontend Pro, and we'll see how we can set things up on there. For this example today, we're just going to be letting the end user add in their own entries and then have that confirmed before they'll actually be listed on the website itself. So these are the general options. Like I say, take your time to go through. I would recommend using a reCAPTCHA on there just to make sure that you don't end up with a lot of spam form submissions, especially if your form is open to anybody. Ultimately, the best way of doing this is to have a secure area that someone has to log into before they can start adding content in. But like I say, if you're used to working with WordPress, then I'm sure you can set that side of things up and make this a section that needs to be logged into. Okay, so let's just take a check through. So front end posting, you can see edit page. We're not going to worry about allowing edits and so on. Custom fields in post, well, we're going to set everything and leave pretty much everything as it is for now. We might come back and make a few changes to this later. We'll just save settings just to make sure everything is in place. And now if we take a look on the left hand side, you can see the first option is post forms. We're going to select that. And this is where we can start creating our form to allow for submissions. So we're going to say add new form. We don't want to work with any of these other ones because they're going to have some pre-filled out information. However, if you were just working with a normal post type as part of WordPress or WooCommerce or anything like that, then you could use these as a starting point. We're going to say create a form from scratch. Once you've done that, this takes us in now to the form editor. Before we start adding anything into this, I just want to make sure we jump into the settings and configure everything the way we need it to. So I've got the settings tab, and you can see the first option is post type. By default, this is set to be post. Now, obviously, we want to allow the end user to be able to submit property listings. So we need to change that over and choose property from our options. So I'm going to choose property. That now means that we're related to the right post type, the custom post type we've created. Any other settings inside here? So post status, we don't want this to be published. We want to make sure that it is confirmed before by the administrator of the site. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this into pending review. Post format, we don't need to worry about that. You can see there's nothing listed in there because our custom post type doesn't have any post formats associated with it. Default post category, we're going to leave that as is. We can set a redirect up inside here, so you can see we can redirect it to the newly created post. So this will take it over to our custom post type template and show the end user what their listing would look like, but obviously it isn't available to everybody. If you don't want to do that, you can say it'll just redirect it back to the same page, to a certain page, or to a custom URL. So you may want to sort of set things up so it says, thank you very much for your submission. We'll take a look at it and confirm it, blah, 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 blah. Then you could set up to a custom URL or to a specific page. Up to you how you want to work with that. You can see comment status. We're going to set that to be closed. We don't want comments associated with this particular listing. I'm going to change submit to submit new listing. Post draft. Are we going to enable saving as a draft? So you may want the end user to be able to save their content as a draft before they submit it. That's entirely up to you. I'm not going to worry about that. Then we've got a form template. Well, we're not going to use that. Like I said, we're creating this from scratch. Do we want to use conditional logic on the submit button? So if you wanted to, you could enable this and you could set up then condition or conditions before that submit button will actually be visible. This is a good way of making sure that any relevant data is filled out and you don't end up with blank or not completed forms submitted. This is something that's specific to the Pro version. So if you're using the free version, then you can't have access to conditional logic. You also don't have sort of access to the ACF taxonomy fields that you may create as part of a custom post type. You don't have that option for taxonomies as part of the form. So it's worth bearing in mind if you are trying to use the free version, there are some limitations that may restrict what you could do. So we're going to set that to be no. If you wanted to, you could enable multi-step. So if you have much more complex forms that you want to submit, it might make sense to break those up into smaller pieces. If we come to the edit settings, then you can see that if you wanted to, if you allowed editing, this is where you could control exactly what's going on. Submission restrictions, so you can say, do we want to enable guest posts? So you're an unregistered user. For this example, I'm going to say yes, I do, but this is something that I'm just using this as a demonstration site. Obviously, if you were doing this on a live site, you wouldn't realistically want to do that. What you can do though is, you can see it says requires name and email address before they can submit a post. So that data has to be pre-filled out. We'll leave that as it is. So we need to make sure that is all completed. If you want to, you can require email verification for guests. This is a good way of restricting getting tons and tons of junk emails through. It has to be the email is verified before they can submit anything. And like I say, there's some other options on there. If you enable payment options, so you want them to pay to actually insert a listing, you could enable that at this point and go through and configure that side of things. Then you have things like display settings. How do you want your form to display? Do you want to set up the label positions? Do you want those to be above, left, right, hidden, and so on? So we're going to say we want those above the element. And you want to use the theme CSS. So if you want your theme styling to override any other kind of styling, then it's worthwhile setting that to yes. Alternatively, you could just pick from one of the predefined styles. Finally, you've got the post expiration. Do you want to enable post expiration? If you do, then you can enable that and configure it as required. And the final tab is the notification tab. And this is where you can set up notifications, enable and disable those for new posts or for updates and so on. So you can specify who the email is sent through to. So the admin, for example, of the website, the subject and the content itself. So you can set things up in there, and you can see you've also got a range of different short codes that you can use to personalize and fill out the details from any of the forms submitted or any of the users submitting content. So let's hop back over to the form editor section, and from there we can now start building our form. So what you have is, first of all, at the top you've got the name of the form. So currently it's set to sample form, which doesn't really mean anything, so we're going to click on there and we're just going to call this submit property form, just so it makes a little more sense. We'll check that off, so we now have a name for this. What we've got on the right hand side now are all the different post fields we can use to pull data in. Now, because we've set this up to use a specific post type, and this in this example is the properties, you can see it pulls in the taxonomies. So let me just show you if this was set to post as opposed to being the correct format, which is property. If we come back over to the form editor, you now see that the taxonomies are the normal default taxonomy, which is the category and the tags that's part of a normal post inside WordPress. So just make sure that if you don't see the taxonomies that you need inside here, you need to come up to the settings, into the post settings, and make sure that the post type is set to your custom post type that you're using to submit this form to. So we'll put that back to property, jump back over to the form editor. Our taxonomy is now back in place. So now what we can do is we can build the form up. So at the top you can see we've got post fields, and these are the default kind of post fields. So the title, the content, an excerpt, and the featured image. These are default as part of the custom post type that we created. So what we can do, we can just simply drag in the post title, we can drag in the post content, and we can drag in the featured image. That pulls in all the data. And now what we can do is we can click on any of these and open up the field options. So from here, we can edit all the things that we have available for any of these form elements. So currently, post title isn't really the right thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that. We're going to call this property name. We're going to set that to be required. I'm going to jump to the advanced options, and if we want to, we can put placeholder text in there. So if we didn't want to display this name, we just wanted to have each of these fields having some placeholder text, we could do that, and that'll give us a nice streamlined form. Up to you how you want to set things up. You also have a default value, any word restrictions, the size of the field itself, and the field size, in other words, the dimensions of the field. You can see we can set those up in any way that we want. We can also apply CSS class names, so if we wanted to target any of these field elements and style them independent of our theme or this particular plugin, we could do that by dropping in a CSS class name. We've also then got the visibility option. So this is who can see these elements of the form. Everybody, so it doesn't matter if you're logged in, logged out, a guest, anything at all, you'll see that. You can set this to hidden, logged in users only, so if you're not logged in, you won't see this specific form element, or subscription users only. So if you're applying a subscription model to this plugin and making people pay, you can then link this through to that, so only subscribers will see this. Now, with the paid for version, we also have conditional logic. So we can, if we want to, enable conditional logic, specify where and when this form is going to be displayed. We're going to set that to no. We're going to leave it to everybody because we want everyone to see it, because like I say, I'm not going to go through the time and effort of setting up a registration option, all those kinds of things to restrict who can see this kind of form. I just want you to see how this form works. And if you want to get in there and really start to customize this and take it to another level, you can do that kind of thing. So that's the first one. We'll click on the next field. So we can come back out of this to all fields, click on the next field, click on edit. And you can see now we've got post content. So we're going to change that to property details. Set that to be required into the advanced options, and you can see we can configure the rows, columns, default value, the type of text area that we want to use. So currently we've got this set as a rich text area. If we wanted to restrict some of those options, we could say a teeny rich text area, so we now get less options. Or if you just want to keep it plain and simple, you could just set that to normal, and it's just a normal input box with no formatting options whatsoever. In this example, the teeny rich area makes more sense because we can let people do things like bulleted lists, bold, and so on inside the description of their property. If we want to, we can enable image upload inside this post area. For our example, we're not going to, but if you enable that, it would work pretty much exactly the same way as you expect inside the normal post area inside WordPress itself. You can restrict the number of words. Again, you can set this field size, you can set CSS classes, the visibility, conditional logic. So all those things are pretty much the same, no matter what kind of field that you choose. The third and final option we currently have is the featured image. So we're going to click on that. Featured image is perfectly fine. Yes, we want that to be required. And under the advanced options, we can now set things like the maximum file size that they can upload. And again, we've got the CSS classes and so on. So there's the basics of our form all set up. Now that we've got the standard WordPress fields set up inside our form, the next thing we need to do is go through, add the extra fields in and the taxonomies and so on, and then link them through to the ACF fields. So how do we go about doing that? It's not as complicated as it might first appear. What we're going to do is we're going to say add fields. Now before we go any further, let's just jump back over into our ACF field group so we can take a look at what we have. Now there are a couple of limitations with this plugin. There are certain field types that we can't link through to. So we can't do things like the relationship. This is something that would need to be set up manually, or you'd have a different way of inserting this into the form that's being submitted so the end user, then the moderator of the site, can go through the process of configuring that correctly. So just bear that in mind, that this is a good option, but depending upon the types of things that you create, there are some limitations to it. Now, with that being said, if anybody that's watching this video has found another plugin that does the same kind of thing like this, but also works with map fields, Google map fields, working with relationships, repeater fields, and so on, and allow that as part of the form submission, please let me know in the comment section below so I can take a look at that plugin. I'd like to see options that are available that does the same as this, but also expands upon what it can do. With that being said, let's move on. So the important thing is that we've got access to these meta field names. We're going to need those in a moment. Let's come back onto our post form. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in the property price. So coming back out there, that's set up as a numeric field. So we're going to grab that field type and drop that over onto this section, come in and edit that. So as you can see now, we've got the field label, which just says numeric field. So we're going to change that now to the relevant field name, which is going to be property price. I'm going to put the pound sign after that so people know that we're dealing with pounds. Property price, you can see, is almost correct. So we're going to get rid of that little slash at the end of it, property price. So this is the meta key. If you want to double check, come back over. There's your property price. Making sure that's all correct. That's all good. So is it required? Yes, it is. Advanced options. Do we want to put steps in there, placeholder, minimum value, and so on? So it's up to you how you want to configure this, but obviously make sure you configure it. The thing we do want to do though is where it says show data in post, we want to set that to be no. And all of your ACF fields, you want to set that up to be no. Otherwise, it just looks a little bit rubbish when you see the data that's being submitted, kind of double submits data. So it's not what you want. So all of your ACF fields, set those to show data in post to be no. Okay, so that's the first one. So we're going to go through now the process of adding the rest of those fields in. So the next one we have is the property address. So we're going to come over, choose the text for this. So we can just drag text in and drop that under the price. And what we'll do is we'll just insert, edit that, and change that to property address. As you can see, it thinks the right meta field is going to be the same, only all underscore with, all lowercase with an underscore between the spaces. And again, just check, make sure that's all right. If it's wrong, then replace it with the right value, otherwise it won't link through correctly. So address, yes, we need to make sure that's required. And again, any options you want to set up inside there, you can set that up. The only thing you have to do, like I say, is where it says show data in post, set that to no. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through any of the other normal fields inside here, and then we'll come back and take a look at how we deal with the taxonomies and so on. Now the next field type that we have to put in is a little different. We've got a checkbox set for our property features. So let's go and do that now. We'll come back with our post form, take a look at the custom fields option. We're going to come down, we're going to choose checkbox. It's going to drag and drop that over into position. And you can see what that does if we open up the options is it gives us the ability to go through and add in the various different options that we want to allow the end users to select. Now this is something that it would be nice to have this that would automatically populate from the list of details inside your ACF field. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. So like I say, there are some limitations with this. It's not perfect, but for most use cases, it should be perfectly adequate. So what I'm going to do is change the name of this now to property features, making sure that we've got that spelled correctly. Otherwise, we're going to have a little bit of a problem. So there we go, property features. You can see it says show values as an option. If we click on that, you can see we can have the label and the value. Now, setting up the options, there's a couple of things we need to be careful of. Because we need the label and the value to match up inside this, even though we didn't actually use a value as part of setting this up, if you cast your mind back to the beginning, we need to put both of these in there and we need to make sure they're spelled correctly. Now to double check this, it's always worthwhile coming over to your field groups and there's a list of our choices. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that everything matches up. So I'm going to hide that a second. I'm going to put the first option in, which is air conditioning. If I show my values, you can see it pre-fills that out, but it does the same as it does with the meta field, which is put air_conditioning. So if you are using this where you're using both the value and you're using the label together, then you can make sure both are the same. However, because we're only using the label, we have to make sure that everything lines up. So what I mean is that the value and the label are identical. So you can see we've got air conditioning, capital A, capital C, no space in between. We now need to repeat that for all of the different sections inside this particular form. So I'm going to do that and I'll come back once I've inserted all those values. Okay, so there's all our values added. We're going to come down. You can set this to required, but in all honesty, some properties may have none of these options. So I would recommend for this example, not setting that to be required. Now, if we open the advanced options, we can come in and configure a few bits and pieces. So first of all, it says show in inline list. So currently we have this going down. If we wanted to, we can just set that to be inline, just clears up, makes it a little bit more, sort of less space being taken up for this kind of thing. Remember, show data in post set to no. Hide field label in post, well, we can leave that as is. So everything else on there now is all done and dusted. So let's hop back over now to our field groups. Now, as I said, we can't pull in the map data at this point. This is something that doesn't work with this particular plugin. But because we've got the address, it's just a case of any administrator, when something is added, they can simply copy and paste that over from the address field into the map field, and you should be pretty much all set. It's not ideal, and like I say, if anyone's got a great workaround for this, please let me know. Okay, so the next option is going to be the property gallery. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over out of this, come back to our fields, and we're going to find the option for image upload. I'm going to drag and drop that over into our area below. Now at the moment it says select image. You may be thinking you can only upload a single image. Well, you're not restricted to that. You can open up more. If we edit this, we're going to name this first of all. So we're going to call this property gallery. So we've got the right name in there. And again, meta field is all correct. Required, we're going to leave that set as no. Select image, we're going to put in brackets images, and under advanced options we can set up a few things. So first of all, we can set the maximum file size. So this is enter the maximum upload size limit in kilobytes. Now this says maximum file size, so bear in mind this is a combination of all of the images that can be uploaded as part of your gallery. So I would recommend setting a decent value in there, something that allows the end user to upload however many images you want to set. Say, let's just say, for example, 5 images as a maximum. You need to give them some space to be able to upload a decent amount. So set that to whatever value you think is going to be right for you. We're going to set this to 2048, which is 2 megabytes. That'll do for this example. Maximum file sizes, we're going to set that to be 6. And we're just going to say no to show the field date or the data in the post. Okay, so we've got the gallery option inside there. So we come back over now into our field groups. You can see we've got everything that we can actually set up configured and set up. So the price, property address, features, property gallery. Property agent we can't because it's a relationship field. So with all those things in place, that's the form set up and configured. Now obviously your form is going to have a lot more data involved in it because a property is going to have lots more than what we got in this example. So you just repeat this same process over and over again to make sure you've got everything laid out, all of the data linked through in exactly the same fashion. So that's all we need to do. So providing everything is in place now, we'll hit save form. That now saves the form and allows us to now start to use that, embed that into whatever page we want to use and so on. So now we've put all these different custom fields in. There's one more thing we need to do, and that's put the taxonomy in. And as you can see, we've got a section on the right hand side called taxonomies for property type. And we're simply going to drag and drop that where we want it to go. So we're going to come over and we're going to say this is going to sit in between the featured image and the property price. So we drag that, drop that into place, and you can see that just pulls everything in correctly for us. So let's edit that. What we're going to do is we're going to change this just so it looks a little bit nicer. So we'll put property, get rid of that underscore, put a space in, and type. And there we go. Any advanced options we want, we can set those up inside here, but we're going to leave it as is. I'm going to say it is required. And we're just going to hit save form. Now there's eagle-eyed among you may be thinking, well, you created a select form, but normally select forms only allow you to select a single item, and you would be right. So how can we deal with that where a property could be in multiple different sections, where we've got this hierarchy, for example? Well, we can do that. All we need to do is come to the advanced options and come down, and where it says select, we're going to choose that, and you can see we've got select, which is what we currently have, multi-select, checkbox, text input, or Ajax. So we could, if you wanted to, use checkbox, or we can just then set that to be inline, and you can see that puts it like so. Or we can use it to be not inline and shows us in that hierarchical fashion. So this is a nice way of being able to use that checkbox. It's entirely up to you how you want to set this up. So you can, if you want to, use multi-select, which will give you that option then, so you can just hold the control key down and select multiple different options, or the checkbox option, or you could use text input if you wanted to, but that requires a level of understanding of what you have to type in. So I would say the checkbox is the best option we can use on there. We're going to set that to no, to not show inline, so it keeps the hierarchy of everything we're dealing with. But you can set this up however you want to. So with that in place, I'm going to resave my form, knowing that we've got all that set up. And now we're ready to move on and create the page that's going to hold this form, and we can let the end user then start to submit data. So let's take a look at doing that next. So let's go ahead now and create our new page. Come to the pages section and click on add new. From there, we're going to call this submit new property. Once we've done that, we're going to just say add form. Now obviously you could use Elementor if you wanted to. No real reason why you couldn't, and I would recommend doing that. Just make sure everything fits in nice and neat to your design. But for ease, I'm just simply going to say add a form. Post form is what we want. Submit property form is correct. And insert form. And there's our little shortcode. Like I say, obviously you could tidy things up. Use this shortcode inside Elementor. Do whatever you want to make this look nice and neat and tidy. And I'll come back. I'll edit that later. You don't need to see that. So, okay. Let's hit publish. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at that form in action. So we're just going to say, let's view this. Come over, and there's our form. So you can see there's our property types, everything is set up, property name, details, featured image, all those kinds of good things are all set up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through, I'm going to add some content into one of these, submit it, and then I'll show you on the dashboard how this actually all works. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come back in a moment. I've gone ahead and filled out all the relevant data that we can associate with this property. So as you can see, the name, the property details, the featured image, the property types, price, and so on. There's our images for our image gallery, which we can reorder if we want to. So we're now at the point where we can submit this listing, and then I can take a look at what happens once we submit it. So because we've set this up that upon submission, it takes you through and previews the post, the new entry, you can see that's exactly what's happened. It's taken us over now into our new entry. It's showing us the template that we've set up for our archive, for our properties, and all the details are in place. The name, the address, the price, the date it was added, the image, description, Now there is one little quirk. If we come to the property features, you'll see that there's 3 checkboxes, but no values being passed over. Now don't worry about this, because when we take a look at the dashboard, you'll see that those data values are actually in there, but for some reason when we get this preview, it doesn't show that up correctly. So with that thing in place, what we're going to do is I'm going to jump over and take a look at the actual dashboard and see what's going on there. So let's take a quick look now. In the dashboard, come to properties and say all properties. And you can see there's our new entry, Townley House. You can see it's set as pending, so it's not actually going to be listed. The property types are all set up correctly. And if we come in and take a look at the actual property itself, we can see all the data is inside here. So the property type is all set up, the details, the address, all those relevant checkboxes are checked. So you can see the property features are included, but for some reason it just doesn't show them on the preview. And obviously if you're not doing a preview straight after actually inserting or uploading something, you're just going to go through to a thank you page. That's not going to be an issue. So all we need to do now, as you can see, is that it didn't take over the address. So we just need to simply grab this, drop that into that section there. We'll say, yep, that's fine. Doesn't really matter too much because it's just a partial address. It's just a sample address. We could use it. And finally, if we come down, we can just load in the actual property agent. So Betty will be the one that's working with this. So even though there's a little bit of housekeeping because it's not going to take over all of the details, it does most of what we needed to do. If we jump on the gallery tab, you can see there's the images that are associated with this particular post, and everything else is all in place. So providing that you're happy with the data that's been submitted as part of this form, you can simply go ahead, click on publish, and now that will be a fully fledged listing as part of your website. So we come back out now and we say all properties, we'll see it's no longer pending, it's actually part of the site. So we've now got that all set up. Well, before we move on to the next stage, I just quickly wanted to say that if you're enjoying this video and you'd like to be kept up to date with all the new content that we add on WPTuts, please consider hitting that subscribe button below, smashing the bell icon to be notified every time new content is added to the channel. If you'd like to get our weekly newsletter and be automatically entered into our giveaway every single month, use the subscribe link in the description below. Head over there once you finish watching this video, put your name, your email address in, and you'll automatically be added into that list. Well, let's move on to the next stage in this tutorial. So I've got a few more things I want to show you before we complete this video tutorial. We've got a little bit of housekeeping to do. If we take a look, I've gone ahead and added in a simple navigation. Section things up, so where we've got our hierarchy of flats and houses, and then underneath those we have various different subsections, I've created a menu structure that displays exactly that. However, what happens is if we go and choose one of these, for example, apartments, what will happen is it takes us through to the default bland layout template that doesn't really display things the way that we want. So how do we deal with that? There's a couple of things we could do. We could create a dedicated template that would only show those particular property types, and that's one way of doing it. Or we could do it a slightly different way. Come back into the dashboard, I'm going to come to our template section and then back into our theme builder. Once we're inside there, our default property archive, let's open that up, edit that with Elementor, and currently that's set up to only be used in one location throughout our entire site. So if we come down to the conditions, we're going to click this little arrow next to the update option and say display conditions. Currently that's only being used for the property archive. We could, if we wanted to, use that template in other locations. So let's say add a second condition, and from there we're going to click to open up all the conditions that are available. We're going to scroll down, and because we're dealing with the property archive and all to do with the properties, that's where we want to look for what we can do. So you can see currently we've got it set up for the property archive, but we can also set it for property types. So we click on that and just say save and close. Now at the moment it's set to all, so that's going to do any of the property types, so flats, bungalows, houses, all those kinds of things. Hit save and close. We don't need to update this because we're updating the condition and it automatically updates it when we say save and close anyway. Now if we come back to our apartments, instead of this bland boring layout, if we refresh, what we find now is we get that template layout that we've set up for our archive. So let's just take a look. If we come to bungalows, which I know we have none listed, I can click and you can see it tells us it seems we can't find what you're looking for and the search option is available. Now because only the search option is available because there's nothing to filter based upon price and anything else, so that's why we're seeing that. However, if we come into something that we know there's, for example, a townhouse, click on there and you see that now pulls up the townhouse. brings back those filters, so if we want to filter things down, we can do. Now obviously at the moment, we still have some styling things we need to do for this section with our facets. We're not going to worry about that in this tutorial. Like I say, that's up to you to deal with afterwards. But what we can do now is we can leave it in this way, and as we add more properties and start to flesh this kind of website out, these different sections will then start to populate with information and become a lot more usable. Currently, we only have a handful of properties for demonstration purposes, but let's just say we had 100 or so on there with these different sections, then we'd have a much different scenario. We're just building the infrastructure to take care of that when data is added. So that's the easiest way of doing this. Like I say, if you wanted to, you could create a section that doesn't have the filters and just has this basic layout. All you need to do is create another archive template, name it accordingly, and then just apply the condition to only show this with the archives like we just done. So instead of showing it with everything, we'd simply come in under the display conditions and we just say property types all. Hope that makes sense to you. So that's the first bit of housekeeping. The next thing is we don't really have a home page. If we go back, you can see we just get the default hello world page. So let's rectify that. Let's make a home page that's actually quite useful. Now, there's a couple of things I want to do to expand upon this, and these are things that are entirely up to you if you want to do them, and there's lots of ways once you realize what you can do to be able to structure, organize and categorize data throughout your entire site. So let's just take a look at how I'm going to do one simple thing. We're going to create both featured and recently reduced options. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. Now, I really do like taxonomies when it comes to WordPress, especially when you use those with custom post types. It really allows you to categorize and group things together and get really creative on how you work. So we're going to take that one step further. Come into custom post type UI and add edit taxonomies. And from there, we're going to create a new taxonomy. We're just going to call this special. It doesn't matter what you call this, it's entirely up to you because you can set this up in any way you want. So we're going to call this special and we're going to do the same underneath. We're going to tie this through then to the properties. I'm going to scroll down, leave all these labels as they are, they're not important to us. A couple of things we want to do though is set up how the settings for this actually work. We're going to set it to hierarchical, so say true. Now, one thing I would suggest you take a note of is that when you set things to hierarchical, you don't actually have to create a hierarchy. One of the major benefits of just setting it to hierarchical is it means that it pulls up and gives you checkboxes as opposed to you having to type anything in. So from a usability point of view, hierarchical is just easier to work with. Next up, we're going to scroll down a little bit, and what we want to do is specify this is going to be shown in the admin column. So we're going to set that to true. We're also going to set the show in quick bulk edit panel to be true as well. Add our taxonomy. Once we've done that, we're now going to come to the properties section. You can see we now have special inside there. I'm going to open that up, and from there, we're going to create two new taxonomies. We're going to call this featured. Add that. I'm going to call the next one recently reduced. Now you can add in as many of these as you want. We're just using these to group things together. Okay, so let's just jump over now to our properties. And from there, we're going to just update some of the features. So apartment of doom, we're going to quick edit that. And you can see now we've got special. So we're going to set this to be featured. We'll update that one. And we'll do the same then for homely house. So we'll quick edit that and we'll say that's featured. And finally, we're going to come to the townly house, quick edit that one, and we'll see that's recently reduced. So what we've done is we've applied those taxonomies to a couple of different properties. Well, now we can use that when we create our homepage. So speaking of our homepage, let's come in and just say all pages. And from there, we're going to add a new page in. So we say add new. I'm going to call this homepage. And let's start to make the homepage a little bit useful. Let's publish that. Edit it with Elementor. Quickly just get rid of this title. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to create a homepage that has some content on it that's quite useful. Before we take a look at those featured and recently reduced, we're going to drop in at the top a map that shows all of the locations for any of the properties we have that becomes clickable, and we can just jump straight through to that property direct from the map. Then we'll take a look at doing the featured, and finally we'll take a look at the recently reduced. You can obviously create this in any way you want. This is just an example of some of the features you could add into your homepage. Okay, so first things first, let's create a new section at the top. Let's select that. We're going to set that to be full width. We don't want any column gaps on this. You say no gaps. Then we're going to come and search for our widgets, and we're just going to put in maps. And what we're looking for is this dynamic content for Elementor ACF Google Maps. Now you can tell it's the dynamic content for Elementor. You can see the little red D logo in the top right hand corner. So we're going to grab that, drop that onto our page, and you can see that pulls in a blank map. Now it's blank because we have to do a couple of things. We've got to tell it where we want to pull the data from and what post type we want to pull the data from. So first of all, we got data type. You can see it defaults to ACF map field, but we do have options for address or latitude and longitude. Because we want to put in dynamic data, we're going to leave that set to ACF map field, and then the ACF map, we're going to click and drop that down. And currently we only have one map field associated with any of our custom fields, so we can choose that. Obviously, if you had more than one, name them accordingly, makes sense, and then you can choose them from there. Again, now you can see all that happens is we get a little pin that drops in the middle of it and nothing more. So we've told it what we want to do. We now need to tell it where to pull the data from. So if we ignore all these options and come down to the post type query at the bottom, click on there, you can see we've got the option to say use query. Select that, and we now have 3 different query types we can pull in from. We've got custom post type, we've got ACF relationship, and we've got from a specific post. We're going to use custom post type. We're going to change this from post type of posts, and we're going to come down and choose properties because that's where our map details are located. I'm going to click on that, and then you can see it immediately opens a map up and starts to drop pins into the various different locations. Now at the moment it's a little bit on the small side, so what we're going to do is we're going to come back up to this and we're going to make it a little bigger. So we're going to set this to something like 600 pixels. There we go. Nice thing you can see is a red marker is where there's an individual property. This little blue symbol is going to denote the fact there's more than one property or more than one entry in that location. As you zoom into that, you'll see that things will become broken down until you get close enough to break things down and show you all the pins in that location. So that's already pretty cool. Problem is, we need to make sure that when we click on any of these entries, it takes us through and views the property. So what we can do is we can come over to the info window, and you can see we've got some options, but once we enable the link to post, all these will disappear. So we're going to click on that. Now that makes each one of these individual little pins, when we move into sort of these clusters, we can click on them and go directly to the post itself and show the details for that particular property. Now you can, if you want to, come into the styles option, and currently is set to roadmap. You can change that to any of the 4 options that are default with Google Maps. You also come into the style section and you can choose from a custom option where you can go to the snazzystyles.com website, configure things the way you want, or you can use one of the predefined snazzy styles. Once you do that, we can just choose one of the styles we want. I'm going to go for this light gray, and you can see that now makes it a little bit more evident where the different locations are and kind of sits in a little better with our particular page. Now, if you're wondering how this all works, there's a couple of things you're going to need to do. You're going to need to have a Google Maps API. This is something you have to have a credit card associated with. And I'm not going to go into detail with this because if you are going to start working with Google Maps API, there's a lot of information out there. And I've done a dedicated tutorial on how to work with this particular plugin in more detail. I will link that in the description below. So if you want to find out more about this in its own dedicated tutorial, you can do that. But all you need to do is have 2 things. You need to have the Google Maps API, which you've already done to work inside the ACF area of our custom post type, because that allows us to see the map inside there. And also when you're using this particular plugin, the dynamic content for Elementor, in the settings, you need to drop in your API for your Google Maps inside there as well. Just go into the settings, so automatically pulls up whenever you install and activate this plugin, drop in your API, and you are then good to go. So with that in place, we've got everything set up. I can come into controls and I can enable or disable anything I do or don't want on there. So you can see the marker cluster, I can disable that if I want to. And you can see we now get a little group there of various different pins. I think the clustering looks better because if you're dealing with properties and you're zoomed out on your map, you may have a lot of properties in one given area. And I think a lot of pins in there will start to get a little unwieldy. Full screen control, well, we can disable that if we want to. You can see once you do that, the little symbol in the top right hand corner disappears. Same goes with things like the street view control, scale control, rotate control, pan control, and so on. So we can just enable or disable any of the features that we want or don't want in this particular map setup. Once you've done that, we can save that if we want to, and it's all good to go. But we want to go on and start to create a couple more steps, got more entries into this home page to make it even more useful. So let's come in and add another section now underneath this. We're going to click to add, drop in a new section, and make a little bit of space above and below. So we'll just set 50 pixels above, 50 pixels below to give us some breathing space on there. Next up, we're just going to drop in a heading that tells it what exactly is going on with this particular section, and we'll say featured properties. We'll duplicate that, and underneath we'll just set this as recently reduced properties. Capitalize that. We'll worry about styling those a little later. Come back out now. I'm going to come over and we're going to grab the posts option and drop that underneath our featured properties section to start off with. Now, you've seen this before. We did this with the archive page, and we're going to do pretty much the same thing. I'm going to change the skin to our custom option, and from the new option underneath, we're going to say default property loop. You can see that now will pull in the styling. However, obviously, as you can see, it's pulling in the wrong data. So we're going to come down to query. From there, we're going to change that from posts to properties. And you can see that now pulls in, well, pretty much all the properties we have listed, which isn't what we want. What we do want to do, though, is include by. So we're going to set a filter up inside here to only include the ones that match a certain criteria. If we click, we've got two options, term and author. We're going to choose term, and then we open up another option underneath that says, what is the term you're searching for? Now, this is features. We're going to start typing in featured, and you can see that now searches through and says special, featured. Special being the taxonomy that we've created, featured being the actual taxonomy entry. So we're going to click on that, and you can see that now we'll pull in just the ones that we marked up as featured. So now we can go through if we want to adjust the layout and make sure we've got everything laid out the way we like it to be. So if we wanted 2 or 3 or 1, however we want to set that out, the maximum number of posts, we're going to set that to be 2 as well. So we're only going to show the 2 featured posts. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to duplicate that. We'll drop that down to the reduced section underneath. If we can get that to go down there. Actually, let's just move that up. There we go. So we're going to click on this, and we're going to come down to our query, and we're going to change our query. So we're going to change from special, and we'll just type in reduced, and you can see it now says special recently reduced. We're going to click on that, and that will now show us the recently reduced item. So anything that's been marked as recently reduced will now be listed under this section. So obviously what I can do now is I can go through and style things out, and I could create as many as I wanted on here. And again, going back to my comments earlier on, we have a handful of properties, so you're not really seeing this in the best light. If you had hundreds of properties, you start to see that this all lays out nice and tidy, and you could then easily go through, configure this to have more or less entries. If you wanted to put sliders in there, you could do all kinds of really cool things. But this just gives you an idea of what you could do just by scratching the surface of some of the things we can do. But ultimately, just showing you how easy it is to start tapping into taxonomies, filtering things, and creating much more feature-rich websites. So I'm going to quickly style the entries on here, and then I'm going to take you over to the page and show you how this all works. So I've set this up now as our home page, and as you can see, our map is at the top, our featured properties, our recently reduced properties. I can click on any of these, go through and view the details for that specific property, or I can come back out, I can zoom into the map, I can come into Cardiff, for example, find the properties that I want inside there, click on one, and that'll take me through then to the property, and I can go and view the details. And if I like the look of it, I can inquire about the property by contacting the agent. So you can see the homepage already becomes a lot more useful. That map with the multiple pins, featured properties using the taxonomies, all those kinds of things are pretty cool. So we're almost at the end of this deep dive video, but there's one more thing I want to show you, and this is using a free plugin. We're going to be using admin columns. There's a pro version available, which opens up a ton of extra functionality, and if there's something you want to tap into, it's definitely worth checking out. Links in the description below, so take a look. But we're going to be using the free version because we can use that in conjunction with advanced custom fields and just make our listings on the dashboard just a little bit more intuitive. Doing things like adding the categories or taxonomies that they're listed in, applying the featured image, a whole range of different data. We can pull all that in and just make finding properties, filtering properties, and just editing properties considerably easier. So let's just jump back into the dashboard now. Let's go through to the admin column setup and let's start configuring things to make it just a little bit more usable for yourself or anybody that actually manages and maintains the listings on your website. So we take a look at our property section. It's quite uninspiring and not really that helpful, especially when you're looking for properties. So how do we go about making it easier? Well, let's take a look at what we can do with admin columns. This is the free version, like I say, so if you want the pro version with a ton more options, and especially if you're running a properties-based website, I would recommend grabbing yourself a copy of that. I've got no affiliation, I get no money from them. It's just a very, very powerful, useful tool. But the free version still gives you a ton of options. So let's take a look at what we can do. Once you've got it installed, whenever you come into any of your sections like this, your taxonomies, your listings and so on, you'll see a little cog icon. This allows you to edit the columns. Now click on that, and that takes us through to admin columns. As you can see, we're currently looking at the property section, but you can, if you want to, come in and edit pretty much anything on here. But we're going to focus on the properties. At the moment, we've got title, property types, date, and dynamic content. Well, dynamic content doesn't do anything for us, so let's remove that completely. Property type is useful. The date that it was added is also useful. However, let's come in and take a look at the add columns. Now, even though we've got ACF installed and you need to have Pro and the ACF add-on to actually really take full advantage of all the options you can do with advanced custom fields, we can still do a couple of really useful things. So first of all, let's put the featured image of the actual property itself in. So we're going to change this from actions. We're going to scroll down until we find featured image. I'm going to click on that. We can set up any parameters we want on there. We're going to say that, well, we set that to about, well, let's set a pixel value. So we'll set that to be 80 pixels because the width and the height of the thumbnail is going to be set to 60 pixels. This is going to give us a nice little area. So we'll drag that to the top. So that will be the first item on there. We'll close that down. So we now got a featured image, title, property type, and date. What else can we do? Well, we could do lots of different things. Property types is perfectly useful. If we wanted to, though, we could easily come in and set up some actions. So instead of us having to go through and do various things like the quick edit and so on, we could set an action column up inside there. We'll say we're going to use icons as well, and we'll leave that at the end. So let's just update this. Just make sure that everything is saved out. And what we're going to do is we're going to view that property screen. So we're going to click back on there and look what we've got now. Something that's a lot more useful already. We can see a thumbnail of the apartment itself, the name of the apartment, the property type, the date that it was published, the actions we can do. So we can do edit, we can do quick edit, we can delete, we can preview. So all these things you'd normally see when you mouse over, just by putting these icons in there makes it a more user-friendly interface. Now obviously you can, if you want to, come in and start editing and adding anything you want inside here. So let's just say let's add another column in. What we're going to do is we're going to come down and we're going to say we want to add in a taxonomy. So we're going to choose taxonomy. Now the nice thing with this is we can still reference custom taxonomies. We don't have to be limited only to those taxonomies that are part of WordPress itself, the core WordPress. So property types is being pulled up, and as you can see, that's perfectly fine. However, let's just change that to special so we can see what the specials are. Taxonomy, we can change the label if you want to, which is just the name of the top of the column, and the number of items. We can specify how many maximum we want on there. So we've only got 2 in there anyway, so we can leave that to whatever. What we are going to do though is we're going to come up and say we're going to change property title, or the title of this, and we're going to change this to be something that's a bit more useful. And we're going to call this property name. So it already makes it more sense. So we can rename these, we can change the labels, we can adjust things, we can reposition things any way we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this special, and we're going to put that next to property types, and we'll just update this again. Jump back to our property screen, and you can see now we have a much more useful layout. Like I say, we've got the property types in there, we've got the featured, the recently reduced and so on, property name is being pulled up, the date was added, all our actions. So we've just created a much more usable admin dashboard for dealing with properties straight out the box without costing a single penny. Well, that's how we go about creating a much more complex, much more comprehensive, and a much more powerful WordPress-based website, focusing specifically on creating a real estate site. Now, like I said at the top of this video, you're not limited to doing this for just a real estate site. All the kind of skills, the topics, the plugins, the tools, the things that we've covered in this video are going to open up a ton of different opportunities. So if you want to create business listings, you want to create more bespoke websites, car sales websites, a whole range of different things, you now have the tools and the knowledge to be able to expand your skill set into those areas and ultimately charge more for your work. As always, all of the applicable links are in the description below, and if you'd like to use any of those, if they're affiliate links, costs you no more money, but does help support the channel and give us a little bit of support to create more great content like this to help you get more out of WordPress. As always, I'd love to get your feedback on what we've covered in this video. Do you find it useful? Anything you think I've missed out or you'd like me to expand upon? Let me know in the comment section below so I can take a look and ultimately make more content for you. As always, my name has been Paul C. This has been WPTuts, and until next time, take care.